Okay, welcome everyone. 7 o'clock. Right. This is a meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee. I'm Councillor Alistair Neal and I'll be chairing the meeting. Just to remind everyone, the meeting will be filmed for inclusion on the Council's website. Please note that other people may film, record, tweet or blog from this meeting. The use of these images or recordings is not under the Council's control. So, and then just to remind us all, about the role of Overview and Scrutiny is to provide an independent, critical friend, a challenge, and to work with the Council's executive and other public service providers for the benefit of the public. The committee considers submissions from a range of sources and reaches conclusions based on the weight of evidence, not on party political grounds. Okay, so first of all, apologies for absence.
None received, Chair.
Okay, second, minutes of the previous meeting. Anyone got any comments? The minutes of the previous meeting. Chris? No. Okay. Okay. So everyone like to propose that we accept the minutes. Chris, Adrian, second. Right. All in agreement? Okay. Minutes agreed. Okay. So declarations of interest. Any declaration of interest? No. All right. Public question time.
There's one public question. Sorry, no public questions. We have one member question from Councillor Gary Cowan.
Okay, I will deal. Gary's not at the meeting, so I'll just give the answer to the question in his name. Right, so
is it worth reading the questions? Can you read out the questions?
Okay, I'll read the question as well. Right, okay. Right, and this is a question about the unreasonable persistent complaints. Right, so the question is this policy suggests that the approach will only be used in extreme circumstances, but that it was not the case. It was not the case of a resident who recently complained about allotment allocation, where he was considered an unreasonable persistent complainant and severe action was taken against him. The report states that an unreasonable persistent complaint can be a complainant who has been responded to in full but still wishes to pursue the same complaint. This assumes that in all cases the council officer's response is correct and that the complainant is wrong. That implies that the complaint in such a case is guilty without any right of appeal, and action against them will be taken in accordance with policy. My question is it correct that if the council officer's reply is not correct, can the policy be used to make the resident an unreasonable persistent complaint and formal severe action taken against them without the residents having a right to a formal appeal? Okay, so right, this is the answer. If a complainant is unhappy with the council's response to their complaint, they can contact the local government and social care ombudsman. This service can be accessed at any stage of the complaints process. Although the ombudsman may decide not to investigate until the council's own complaints process has been exhausted. It is a free service and the ombudsman undertake an independent investigation into whether the council has made the right decision in the right way. The council proactively provides signposting to the Ombudsman following the end of its complaints process. Therefore, if a complainant is still unhappy with the way the council has dealt with a complaint, they have a route to escalate, which the council would actively encourage. The Ombudsman has their own guidance that we have used to update council policy. In terms of an appeal process for the policy, this is useful feedback, and we will ensure that it is considered with other feedback from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Okay, agenda item 50, progress of waste changes projects. So right, and Steve Brown's going to introduce it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So the purpose of attending Scrutiny Committee tonight is to update on the Waste Changes project. So we've circulated a report, which is in front of you, and we intend to provide a presentation. The presentation will cover off all of the issues within the report, and that will allow for any questions to come forward. It's probably important just to note the sort of the flight path of this work. So we're bringing forward the Waste Collection Changes project that's previously been approved, and the purpose of tonight, the presentation in the report, is we're moving forward with that and the future implementation of that. We've decided to sort of come forward really early with this, and we've already last week briefed all the political parties on this to make sure that prior to implementation, that any sort of checks, challenges, anywhere we can finesse the project and make the final product better and easier to roll out, that we've got time and headroom within our programme to do that. So last week, we briefed all the political parties. We received some really good sort of feedback and some insight and some assistance with that from all members. So the waste collection project is in a stronger place than it was last week, and last week it was in a stronger place than it was the week before. So I understand that there might be a sort of concern about it's the same presentation, but we really wanted to be clear that we take this to the political parties, we get individual briefings, and then we come to scrutiny to give it its due respect and regard in bringing a project like this to scrutiny. The waste changes project is a large project, and that does need to be understood. It will impact on nearly every house in the borough. It will require a lot of resource, and there's a large group of officers working along this. It will be tying up colleagues from communications, from performance management, from finance, from waste management in order to deliver, and it will take over a sort of the best part of a year to deliver this. And there will be issues and there will be risks that need to be understood, but what we want to do is leave this presentation with members having some confidence in this project, understanding what the key issues are, understanding what the key milestones are, and then being able to appreciate that in the future. I should add that we will be coming back to this scrutiny at some time in the future, and we would probably see that around the sort of the late May period, just prior to the operational implementation of that. Preceding that, we will be sending out regular briefing notes to members, and we will make sure that we engage and we keep in touch with everything that we need to do. So the structure of the session is we'll take you through the presentation. That's about sort of 30 minutes, 30-ish minutes, and then we'll sort of take any questions, and then I'll update then on the market engagement exercise for the new way. So everything that's in the report will be covered off in the presentation. So the purpose of the outcomes for this project are quite clear. You know, we want to have a reduction in the tonnages going into landfill. We really want to drive those down, and that's quite key for us. And there is a cost saving within that if we're able to do that. Never mind the environmental benefits. So it's really important that this project is not just looked as a waste project, it's looked as an environmental project because it links directly into your climate emergency, and it links directly into your environmental strategy as well as supporting the council with some of its financial issues that we're currently aware of. So perhaps it should be seen in that light. We're also looking to reduce carbon or a carbon saving of a reduction of around 2,400 tonnes that the project would seek to save. So that's quite a clear outcome in itself. We want to also be really ambitious with recycling. We really want to do that. So we want to move our sort of current recycling rate from 54% up to 64%. So to give you some context of that, we're sort of about 42nd nationally out of about 300 boroughs, and we really do want to push that through. Within that, you know, scrutiny will understand that in the Q2 performance figures. You know, there is a key performance indicator there for waste, and that figure is increasing because the number of waste that's going into landfill is going up. So it went up by about 3%. We have a target of 16,500 tonnes per quarter, and we were about 3% of that at Q2, which was about 16,800 tonnes. Q1, we were at about 18,000. So we've got an increase in pressure there that we need to address. Also, we've got new houses coming on stream. So in the financial year of April 2022 to March 23, we had circa nearly 900 houses come on stream in the borough. And if that sort of repeats, we've got an upward, what you would call a systemic pressure on the service. There's more houses and there's more tonnage going in, so we need to address that, and that is a cost. So we need to do that. The project also will look at achieving savings of around about £1 million, around about £1 million over the sort of the project, and we're confident of that. So at last night, in this very room, we bought 2 MTFP papers to a scrutiny committee. So that was about making a savings of £1 million, and the other paper was just about adjusting the savings to make sure that we collect the entire savings over the lifetime, but where we've reviewed the project and adjusted it and supported the governance a bit more, we've moved into that. So the project has got really clear outcomes. We've also had these independently checked and independently verified. So as much as we've got confidence in these, it's not your own officers telling you this, and wouldn't they tell you that anyway? We've got some independent verification of that because we know that they'll be rightly challenged. That is not to say for one moment that there are not risks for this project. It's a large project. It covers every houses. It will impact on some residents' collection days, and we will have to communicate well with them and change them of that. And there will be some people that were concerned, and we need to make sure that we communicate well on that. People who need assisted collections and clinical waste and other support on that. It's not a traditional sort of council £1 million saving where we come to scrutiny, it goes to the executive, the decision is made, we pull the lever or press the button, and we know that we can make the saving. We'll rely on behavioural change, we will rely on resident engagement, and we really rely on the collective effort of all members to give us that sense of civic leadership to help support and to work that through. And part of the engagement with members is to sort of see if we can really sort of galvanise that. And if we do all of that, and if all of that aligns, then some of those targets and outcomes that we've come, we think we can really get near those, and time will tell. But you know, we have a lot of confidence at this stage that that is achievable. So we've put up on the screen essentially how this will lay out with sort of food collections. There'll be no change to sort of assisted collections and clinical waste, and then obviously moving to a position where there's a residual waste collection every other week. And as we go through the presentation, Richard will pick up on them. We'll pick up on the detail of that. So we do need to make changes. We do need to communicate well. Some people will get concerned, and we'll talk you through how we intend to manage that and the governance that we've wrapped around that. Thanks, Richard.
Hello there. I'm Rebecca Bird. I am the Communications and Engagement Lead for Place and Growth, and am leading the communications on the waste collection changes project. So I'll just talk to you a little bit about what we're doing for the communications and engagement, and then can also answer questions at the end. So we have a very detailed communications and engagement plan that has been agreed and signed off by all levels. And it focuses, so we have the first phase of it now, and then we'll work on a later phase after Christmas. So the first phase is really telling people what is happening and when. So that's the most important thing. There are a lot of key messages about the environmental benefits, about the financial benefits, and about the legislative context that we operate within. But the most important thing is that people know what is changing and when those changes are going to come into place. So we know that we will be getting wheeled bins for most households across the borough, and that collections will change, and that that's coming in summer 2024. So those are the headline messages. And then we also have the environmental and normalizing messages that we want to communicate. So as Steve said, these changes have the ability to make us be one of the top 10 recycling local authorities in the country, which is a really exciting opportunity for us. And we want residents to get excited about that opportunity. A lot of our residents already do all of the recycling and all of the positive things that they can in their waste, the way that they deal with their waste. But not all of our residents do that. And so it's trying to educate those residents and get them to change their behavior to recycle more. And these changes, the changes in the collections will help do that. So we need to give them the tools to start changing their behavior now. So these changes are in line with the way that waste is collected in most of the country. Richard will talk about that a little bit more, and they'll help us meet our environmental goals like waste and carbon reduction. Our neighbors already do this. 85% of the country already does this. And even though people generally don't like change, this we know that this works elsewhere, and it will work for us. So those are the top level messages that we're telling people. But then, of course, as Steve also mentioned, the financial messages are just as important. And that is, we do know that this will make the savings that we need. We know that we need to take our residents on this journey with us, but that the savings will be made, and that's evidenced across the country when other local authorities have made these changes. So those are the key messages, and we need to reach all residents. So there will be a number of residents whose collections will not change. We still need to reach them so that we tell them that that their collections won't change, but we also need to reach everyone else and help them understand what will change and when. We will use partners to help us with this. So we'll talk to the town and parish councils and have them help with the messaging. We'll talk to schools, as most of you I'm sure know. If we can talk to children and get children to talk to their parents, that's a really good way to help behavior change. We have the housing associations we'll be working with, our voluntary and community sector organizations, and of course our partners at Veolia. We'll also be communicating with all members so that members can help us get this information to their constituents. We know that you all have a lot of influence in your neighborhoods and that you have lines of communication that we don't have access to. So we will give you the tools that you need to help your residents understand what's happening and when it will happen. How we communicate the changes. So we'll use our digital channels, and those are, we reach most of the borough digitally, and we know that. So we will use all of our digital channels. We will use the website. There is currently a hub on the website already that lists all of the information about the project and the timelines that we have currently. We'll also use media releases for any of the milestones. We'll use our electronic newsletters. We have a dedicated newsletter for rubbish and recycling that goes out every 2 weeks, and that will give all of the information. So for residents who want to know what's happening and when, we would encourage them to sign up to that specific newsletter. There's a dedicated URL that we can send out, and we are sending out so that people will sign up to that newsletter. And that is the primary digital tool that we will have, but we'll also use social media, direct emails, and we'll use our partners' digital channels as well. We know that we don't reach everyone digitally, so non-digital channels that we will use. The first thing that will go out will be a leaflet with the blue bags, and that will talk about the changes and when they're going to happen. Then there will be at least one more paper communication that goes to all residents. And then we will also do things like we can prepare posters that go up in areas where we know people are standing around looking at things, like supermarkets, town and parish council halls, in our leisure centers, our libraries, and so on. And then we have something that Richard will talk about later, and that is we have a couple of dedicated outreach officers who will be working on this project, and they will be going to community events. They'll be doing road shows, knocking on doors in areas where we think that that's necessary, offering telephone assistance, and so on. So we have a variety of different tools that we'll use, and we know that we will need to use all of those tools to make sure that we reach everyone, because people access information from us in different ways. Also, sorry, in printed material, the borough news that will go out in the spring will also have this featured prominently. Next slide, please. So this is just the homepage of not the homepage, sorry, it's one of the pages of the waste collection changes on our corporate website. So you can see there the different sections that they have: introduction, what's going to change, could you recycle more, why do we need these changes, and then a frequently asked questions section. So most of the questions that you and your residents will have are covered off on those pages. So if people ask you questions, I would encourage you to familiarize yourself with those pages and also tell your residents to as well. And we will keep updating that as we have more information, as anything changes, etc. So we know that one of the ways that one of the most important ways that we can reach our residents is using your help. So we will be offering all members the support that they need to contact their residents. So one of the things that was requested at the member workshops over the last 2 weeks was that we provide a kind of one-page summary of all of the changes and everything that we know now, the high level, not everything, because that would take more than a page, but the high level summary of what's happening and when. And that we should have that to you very soon. And that's something that you can use when you're talking to your constituents. And that you can also copy and paste pieces of if you're answering questions on social media or in emails and so on. So if there's other support that you need that you can think of that would be helpful, please feel free to contact me, and we'll see what we can do, because we know that all of the ways that we can get this information out to our residents, we want to use all of them. And I think that's all I have, so I'll hand over to Richard Bissett.
Thanks, Rebecca. So Steve and Rebecca have looked at the kind of why delivery of the actual scheme itself. And I'm going to do a bit more detail in terms of the how, especially around the plan for delivery for residents. And there's 3 items on here: support, equipment, and customer contact. So in terms of support, it's absolutely critical that we get the support for members and residents correct. We're going to employ 2 full-time recycling engagement officers, and they'll be out and about supporting residents in workshops, roadshows, door-to-door knocking, for instance, and speaking to residents on a one-to-one basis. And that will be for a year. Currently go through recruitment of those. Additionally to that, we have 2 customer services officers for a 6-month basis, and they'll be supporting residents via phone and on email. And those two groups are going to be working really closely with each other to ensure the customer journey is absolutely right and we get that correct. In terms of equipment, we know that there's going to be information in terms of recycling bags. We're going to extend the amount of hubs in the borough. At the moment, we have town and parish councils and we have Shoot End. We're going to extend that to schools, leisure centre and community centres. And the reason why that is because we want to extend the daily window for people to collect items or the recycling bags or the food waste containers. At the moment, it's nearly 9 to 5, but going through leisure centres, for instance, it could start at 6 o'clock in the morning all the way to 10 o'clock at night on a 7-day-a-week basis. Rather than at the moment, we're 9 to 5 on a 5-day week. So we're expanding that. The other point is, if any councillors that would like to store and give out recycling bags or food waste containers, please just let me know and be happy to drop those off to you. For wheel bins, the contract's been awarded and they will be distributed from late May all the way through to the end of July, and that's covering about 65,000 houses. And it's going to take a bit of time for them to do that, hence the reason why it's such a long time. For customer contact, Rebecca's already covered, but have a look at we've got a dedicated web page and we've got dedicated social media outlets. Have a look at the FAQs. As Rebecca says, if there's anything that's on there that we haven't covered, please let us know and we get that covered off. For assisted collections and larger families, we've also already been proactive around this. We've contacted all 1,200 assisted collections on the system, understanding if they require the assisted collection going forward or not. We are now into the final phases of following up on that and engaging those that haven't come back to us to make sure they're fully supported and we leave no one behind. That's a really critical point. In terms of larger families, we have also contacted them and that started this week. That's to determine if they need, say, a larger wheel bin. So standard wheel bin is 180 litres. Larger wheel bin is 240 litres, but the onus first of all will be on recycling and reducing waste. So we've contacted them. We will continue to work with them to reduce their waste and increase the recycling, because we know on a recent waste composition analysis that the average blue bag contains 65% of recyclable material. That could be paper, cans, plastics, glass bottles, etc. So there should be very little going in the black bin. It should be going through to the recycling bag, the food waste caddy, and also the bring banks for textiles and glass. We'll also bring customer services all the way along with us as well and make sure they're prepared for the changes, and that work is underway and ongoing. So let's have a look at the changes. What exact changes are being made then? 2 important points here. First point is most residents will receive a wheel bin. The other important point that collection days will change for some households, and I'll explain a little bit more later in the presentation about that. Members will recall in February and March, in ovarian scrutiny and also in executive, that a full equality impact assessment was undertaken. And that supports a number of key criteria, such as larger families or households with hygiene waste. As I've said, we've already proactively contacted those people to determine if they need additional support for clinical waste, disposable nappies, for instance, or pads, etc. We want to help people through this. they can certainly go in the wheel bin and be collected on an alternate week basis. That's absolutely fine. That's not a problem. That's a lot of what a lot of other people do. However, there may be more generated, and we can support people with that, with additional collections through our clinical collection service. Assisted collections, yeah, absolutely, they're the most vulnerable society in some ways, and we want to bring them with us and make sure they're not left behind. Therefore, we are engaging with them now. We're going to get the engagement officers on there as well. Clinical collections, that apart from the hygiene waste and the pads, etc., they will continue for sharps. And then children in nappies, yeah, all nappies can go in the wheel bin and they will be collected on a fortnightly basis, and that's absolutely fine. That's what happens in other areas. There'll be no changes for weekly food, or as already stated, no change for garden waste and subscription service for the bins and sacks, and they'll be continually collected on a fortnightly basis. Approximately 700 properties with limited storage access will remain on weekly blue bag collections. I'll explain a little bit more in a second. And collections for communal flats will not change, but that doesn't mean that change doesn't need to happen in the flats, because we need as much recycling out the flats as possible to reduce our waste and reduce our costs. That is absolutely key. So let's look a little bit more detail about assisted collection in the property surveys. As I've already said, we've contacted the assisted collections just to make sure they're okay and if they still require them or not. Residents can continue to have an assisted collection. All they need to do is contact us either by website or by phone. That's not a problem. And we provide support to those who need further support around assisted collections, just to helping them to adjust to changes if needs be. And we notify the residents by February 24th and keep you ward members updated in terms of progress of the assisted collection review. For property surveys, we have surveyed all the properties in the borough to determine if the property is suitable for a wheel bin. And the criteria for that is properties are considered suitable if they have a place to store the wheel bin, either in the front garden, or if there's no front garden, access through a garage or side gate to a back garden. That's absolutely key criteria. Any properties that can't accommodate a wheel bin will remain on weekly blue bag collection, with 1 blue rubbish bag collected per week. And that is the same situation as we have this year with 54 blue bags given out. But clearly, recycling bags are unlimited, and food waste as well. And we notify residents by February 24 for those that are going to be not going to be able to accommodate a wheel bin and stay on the weekly collection service, and we will keep ward members updated as we go through. Flats, as I say, will continue on weekly collection service. They might be on bins, they might be on bags, but absolutely key to say, look, we need to maximise the amount of recycling out of flats, and therefore limit for 1 bag per week to try and realise that. So key risks. There are absolutely risks with this. This is a big project, but let's have a look at the mitigations first. So we've got a robust communications campaign that's underway. Phase 1's been launched. We've got really good feedback on that. Phase 2 should be launched shortly. We've got the recycling engagement officers, which are going to be supporting residents, especially the most vulnerable in society. And we've got additional customer services officers to support those residents on the phone or via email. A number of key risks to this is residents not putting the correct waste in the right container. So we need to maximise recycling and minimise rubbish. So the ethos of alternate week collections is there is 1 rubbish container, 1 wheel bin. The majority of residents are doing a brilliant job in the borough. They are recycling, which is fantastic. But there are some residents that are not recycling, and we see that on a daily basis. So those residents that aren't recycling are going to fill up their bin pretty quick. What this is going to do is encourage those residents that aren't recycling filling up their bin pretty quick to ensure that they then change to recycling behaviour and then minimise the amount of waste in their wheel bin, because we will not be collecting any wheel bins that can, any additional side waste being presented by the bin, and the bin has to remain closed. That's key. Not putting out recycling containers on the right collection day. That will be mitigated through comms and a calendar going to all residents. And that works in other authorities that have gone through this process. And residents not having enough good recycling containers. Yeah, we've covered that off in terms of additional hubs and making sure it's the time window for collection is there. Residents are not participating in food waste. Again, that is very similar in terms of filling up the bin and not having enough space, but it's the right thing to do. Absolutely right thing to do to recycle. And residents not being aware of and understanding the changes which will be mitigated through the comms, which has already started. So let's have a look at the roadmap. I don't propose to go through this in too much detail because you've got it in your packs, but focus on the few key items. So in June, July, we started on the project. We procured the bins, and we started off with the engagement plan. August to October, we awarded the wheel bin tender. We undertook the property survey, and we agreed the comms plan. October, November, we worked on the campaign materials and launched. And we are working really closely with our IT colleagues to make sure that everything is absolutely right for delivery of the new CRM service when it goes live in August. And Veolia, we're doing a lot of work around the routine scheduling. December to January next year, recruiting our support staff, identifying the roadshow sites, and throughout February and March, we'll be increasing the information to residents and starting on roadshows. Late May through to the end of July, we'd start to deliver the wheel bins, mop up deliveries, distribute leaflets, and train the collection crews on the vehicles with the wheel bins. And then August, September, the scheme goes live in August. That includes the website going live, the CRM going live, and mop up collections around that. Members will be aware within the packs there is an item on service standards, and this might be new to Woking Borough Council, but it's certainly not new to other authorities. So what this does is just sets out the expectations of residents of us and us of residents as a collection authority. So that will look at things like what bin provision at properties, what goes in each bin container. That's absolutely critical to make sure that we realise and generate as much recycling as possible while driving down our refuse. Where to present the bins and containers, absolutely key, because we don't want residents obstructing pavements, footways, and roads with containers. So we will ensure that we write to residents to determine, to outline where those bins are going to be presented. And we'll also follow up with further enforcement action and checks by the waste team for those residents which do obstruct, but we don't think it's going to be that many. But in there about assisted collections as well, and the availability of those missed collections, especially around missed collections, repeated missed collections that we want to drive down. We've got a really good missed collection rate in our borough. It's very low. Items around about communal properties, flats and HMOs, driving recycling, and other waste streams as well, about garden, clinical waste and bulky waste, the services that we offer. Throughout this process, we have a very strong project governance plan in place, and that is through from the bottom in terms of nuts and bolts of people doing the work. On the blue slide there, in terms of fortnightly basis, and then we move up to the green slide on a monthly basis, where the head of work streams critically assess the work that's been undertaken, how's it undertaken, and the next steps. Any escalations into the yellow box there is steering group, which is an AD level. That includes the AD of finance. to ensure that we understand the risks, we understand the finance, we've got monitoring within that, really robust. And then that goes to the red box, which is on a monthly basis, CLT reporting, member engagement, which is such as this tonight, or a one-to-one basis, or previously through the member workshops, and then onto the programme board. So that concludes that part of the presentation. I know there's one more slide, but I think we're paused there for any questions.
So just to summarise before we take any questions, we've laid out the sort of the project, we've laid out the way forward, we've got some of the outcomes that we're trying to achieve, we've talked about some of the risks, and just to clarify some of the things that we talked about. So the new officers coming in to support in the customer service centre and on the sort of the recycling engagement have been factored into the budget, and the savings that we are going to make are the net savings within that. So it's not an additional cost, it's already factored in, and that was part of the previous approvals that we sought. And again, that sort of appeal to really sort of galvanise the, you know, the collective wisdom of all the members. So to achieve the targets that we wish to do, you know, and really, you know, sort of, you know, a salutary lesson is that if we don't achieve those financial savings as one part of the outcomes, then those savings will have to be found from somewhere else, and then that will be an issue that, you know, probably will not be as straightforward from other areas of the council as it should be. So that probably needs to be thought through. And just to give members reassurance, we've got a really good working relationship with our colleagues at Veolia. You know, we're really working well with them. Confidence is high. Our relationship management with them is good. The portfolio holder is going down to address all the Veolia staff next month in the depot, do a presentation, talk to them, and also make sure that the Veolia staff, when they're out there and engaging with our residents in our sort of public service family, if they hear anything, if they're picking up any intelligence from residents, that's able to be fed back to us, and we're able to work with that either to confirm that we're doing the right thing, or to adjust our position, or to tweak our communications as well. So just to give you that assurance, but there are risks. We do need to work at this, and hopefully, if everything aligns, we should be in a good place. And then on that basis, we're happy to take any questions.
Okay, open up for questions. Alison.
We seem to have a slide missing. You had 3 slides heading project delivery plan for residents waste collection changes, and the middle one seemed to be missing. It wasn't in our pack. If you saw us all like looking through, it was because we were like, where's this one? We haven't got that one. Okay, so but I have other questions. Okay, in the risks, I think we certainly need to include the risk of fly tipping, people who can't fit their rubbish in the wheelie bin, or if they're in a flat and they're only allowed to put one bag out. We need to make sure there's proper comms of if you don't want to recycle and you are making that rubbish, how they can responsibly dispose of that, because I think that is a risk that people will just dump it somewhere around the corner. We all see that in our wards already, people dumping black bags of rubbish. I'd like you to explain a little bit more about how you surveyed all properties to determine if a property is suitable for wheelie bin. I know you mentioned in our group meeting that you consulted the bin crews. I suspect that's if they said, oh yes, they put all theirs out on the lawn. But I mean, I know properties where masonettes and downstairs has the front garden and the back garden, but once a week they're perfectly happy for the upstairs people to put out their green bags, their blue bags, their food waste bin, for 2 hours in the morning, and it's picked up. They're not going to be very happy to have to accommodate 2 wheelie bins. So if you could just explain how you surveyed all properties.
Okay, thanks, Swallow. So first thing about the size, yeah, absolutely. We can, in the minutes, that will be updated. So apologies for that. In terms of the fly tipping, yeah, take your point on board in terms of that. we've already thought about how that could be mitigated. Obviously, fly tipping is illegal. That's the first point. And it's only a criminal activity you're going to undertake it. So the vast majority of residents won't do it. So we are going to be working closely with our ASB team to see what other measures we can put in place. In terms of the property survey, we have the entire LLPG, the local property gazetteers. So that's every single property in the borough. We've looked through those to determine where they are in the borough. We've also gone out and identified, such as Twyford, for instance, or Wokingham. Over here behind, opposite Shoot End, you've got a terrace full of houses. So we've gone to that in great detail. We've talked to the crews, we've talked to the supervisors. However, it doesn't stop there. So what we're going to do is open up to members for any thoughts in terms of other areas that we need to capture as well. So that will be coming through to you soon.
You mentioned at our group meeting that you have got a list of the 700 properties by parish, and you would share that by.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, that's right.
When will we see that?
2 weeks. Within 2 weeks.
Thank you. And then you also said you'd be notifying residents by February. So when are we doing that between now and February?
Okay, so the process is going through tonight, understanding from members' point of view in terms of any properties that need to be looked at, sending out the property survey to members, and then working back through and saying that you might need to look at this, for instance, or that. So that's where it's at. And then we're going to get it finalised, and then by the end of January, ready for February.
So it's in February that
yeah,
we're telling,
correct.
not by February.
No, okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Adrian.
I'll put my microphone on. I wasn't expecting to be called yet. When I read a report from the government, it stated the best way to manage bin collections, environmental services, was to collaborate with other councils. We already collaborate with RE3, with the Reading Council and the Bracknell Council. Will this new setup make us more aligned or less aligned with those other councils and enable potentially to have further, I would say, optimizations in the future? That's the first question.
So I think in answer to your question, you're quite correct. We work with RE3 and sort of Bracknell and Reading Council on that. And as we've alluded to within the presentation, we will sort of move to the waste collection changes. Will move us more into a line with other councils that have pursued this. And because we're doing that, and because we're a sort of in effect a late adopter in that process, we've got a lot of intelligence and network and work with other councils that we can learn from and derive from that. The last slide, once we've finished the questions about the waste procurement, that should answer a lot of your questions about what we need to do for a future waste procurement and some of the issues that we're working through. So your answers will be picked up in due course.
Super, thanks for that. Next question. Steve Moore presented the KPIs, I think it was last year or maybe the year before. And for waste and recycling, it was basically a single KPI, which was green for every quarter and green for the full year. And the previous year was green for every quarter and green for the full year. And it was green forever. Obviously, reporting green forever is pointless. You said that you will try and move the target from 54 to 64%. Once you've got to 64%, will you keep it at 64% or not?
So we have corporate key performance indicators that we report on. So the one for sort of waste tonnage is showing that we're slightly in the red. So as I said in the presentation, we've got 16,500 tonnes a quarter. We sort of quarter two was about 16,900 tonnes, so slightly up. And the quarter one before that was at about sort of 18,000 tonnes. So that's 2 quarters out of a financial year. And that might change and might equalise out. But at the moment, that is the information that says that, you know, we need to do something about the amount of tonnage that's going through. We're also going through some potential changes as well that we haven't quite sort of tuned in the picture. So we've been working today with Oflog, which is the new ombudsman for local government, and they're looking at what key performance indicators for waste and street scene and roads and planning that we should be doing. There's an open consultation on that, and we're feeding back some information. So that might slightly change. And as you're probably aware, the government released some information on simpler recycling only last week. We're doing a draft response on that, and a draft response back to the government is with the portfolio holder for his consideration. We're also to provide you with that confidence, we're also on a national monthly call with DEFRA. So I'm on that sort of national monthly call. So speaking directly to the government officials that are working through this, so we can be really clear on that. And also as part of ADEPT, which is the Association of Directors of Environment, Planning and Transport, you know, I'm sort of work with them on sort of waste and recycling and highways and other things as well. And we're feeding into that process. So that future picture isn't yet tuned in from government. We're pursuing them on that, but then we've got a project that we need to move because we've got systemic pressures and budget savings that we need to do and carbon targets that we need to achieve as well. So that's sort of where we are at the moment, and we'll need to keep members briefed on that as we progress.
And George, sorry, let George.
It was just to add very briefly to that very comprehensive answer that members, I'm sure, will know that as part of our Climate Emergency Action Plan, there's a target of 70% by 2030 in that. So, yeah, absolutely reaching from mid-50s to mid-60s with this proposal. And then beyond that, what we can do, particularly with all the points that Steve's made around the waste strategy at a national level. So I think that target should be always kind of, stretched, but ambitious in terms of our approach.
That is the correct answer. Thank you. We have here, let me communicate very directly with you. These are your project goals, right? The only way this committee and the only way the KPI scrutiny that happens when Graham presents the KPIs, the only way we can monitor your project is against your goals. So these are your KPIs. Would you agree with that, or would you disagree with that?
My view would be that in order for any project to be successful, you've got to have what does success look like? What are the project outcomes? Those are the intended project outcomes. And as I said in the presentation, we've had those externally verified and we've got confidence in them. That is not to say that that is a surefire it, and that we're being safe, inverted commas, council officers that present a low target because we know we can achieve it. There are a lot of risks in this and there's a lot to be done. But if we can get there, we will do. We will have corporate KPIs that will measure other things, but we will be able to respond back on those against the project outcomes to make sure, because that will keep us focused and make sure that we don't go into project drift or mission creep and end up being buffeted by events.
Your answers are fantastically comprehensive, but they're a little challenging for me to really understand. You know, for me, these are 4 simple KPIs that you're saying are your project goals. You must be monitoring these, therefore you must be able to report them. Will you be able to report them, yes or no?
Yes.
Correct answer, thank you. Next question. Sainsbury's have removed their glass recycling recently. Can anyone confirm whether the existing glass recycling facilities in the borough are going to be retained or they're going to be removed?
Thanks, Councillor. So yeah, it's disappointing to learn that and see that Sainsbury's have taken that change as a corporate company, and the majority of their sales, etc., is through packaging. So certainly their responsibility should be put on their shoulders. In terms of glass recycling, at the moment, we are reliant on glass blanks. However, from March 2026, all councils and local authorities in England will have to collect glass at the curbside. That potentially could be, in a wheel bin, or it could be separately. We are still going through the documents that are being released by DEFRA and the government. So once we get a clearer understanding of that, then we'll be able to come back and say, look, this is the approach. And we've also got a waste collection contract, which is ending in 2026. So it's an opportune time to make sure we sew both of them together and get the right system going forward for everyone.
Thank you very much for that answer. Final question, easy, simple question. The previous technology were black non-wheelie bins, plastic boxes, which was stated as, this was going to be the go forward technology. At some point, certainly our boxes, and I've heard of other residents, boxes started to break and smash with being thrown around and whatever. And there was issues with issuing new black boxes. So obviously we don't want to introduce a new technology where replacements are going to be an issue. So I would like a confirmation that if a resident has a defective black wheelie bin, that they will be able to get a replacement.
I'd just jump in here. If the member had read the pack, it's pretty clear what happens in the event of the defective bin. If it's stolen or lost, then the resident has to pay for it. That's in the agenda pack.
Okay, Andrew then.
Thank you. I mean, this is an extremely important, very large, multidisciplinary, multi-stakeholder project. And thank you very much for your very clear and comprehensive presentations and answers to the questions that have been asked thus far. I have one question, and then I'd like to ask for the indulgence of the committee if I might raise a potential recommendation, even at this stage, because it alludes to one of the matters that Adrian's just raised. So my question is to Rebecca. Rebecca, you've explained that the communications programme has now begun. I appreciate that it's still very early days, and it may be quite unfair for me to ask whether there has yet been any feedback from residents about the communications project. But regardless, of whether or not there has already been some feedback, how will that feedback be monitored, collated, used to inform, little tweaks and other adjustments, as we go forward? If there has been any feedback, even at these very, very early stages, are there any common responses that the committee should be aware of, or any themes or concerns that were perhaps not anticipated, or perhaps thought to be perhaps less or more of a concern, than was initially thought? And the final question about communications, I think, is that you've explained, it's been explained how there will be homes that will not be provided with a wheeled bin, and that one of the risks is that this may impact on recycling rates, if I've understood it correctly. So my question is there going to be a specific communications approach, strand perhaps, to those homes, okay, that will not be provided with the wheel bins, to explain how they can continue to improve upon their recycling?
Yes, definitely. Thank you. Thanks for those questions. So we have the feedback that we've had. As you've said, the communications is very early in, we've got a long way to go. We have received some feedback, and it has been limited to social media feedback so far, other than, that's not quite true, I take that back, other than the feedback that we've had from members in the member workshop. So we've had comments, a lot of comments on the social media posts that we've done so far. We've done, in the first week when we launched, we did 2 posts, and we've done at least 1 post a week since then. This week we did 2, and they are getting a lot of engagement, and they're getting a lot of comments. And we have been using those comments and those questions to shape what we're talking about, the key messages. We're also using them to add questions to the Q&A on the website. And so, for example, one of the things that, well, I'd say the biggest thing on social media, but remember that social media, you'll all know this anyway, but social media is, it is not representative of the borough as a whole, of residents across the borough. It is a limited section of society that comments to us on social media, but it's a relevant section. So the biggest question and comment and concern has been about the recycling rate. It's been people that don't believe that recycling will increase if we're giving a wheeled bin, which people look at it and say, well, that's a lot bigger than a blue, the blue bags that we use now, but you're making me continue with the green recycling bags. And now I have to store twice as much. So I'm just going to throw everything, all my recycling, on the week when my rubbish is collected. I'm going to throw everything, all of my recycling, into my wheeled bin. So I don't believe you that rates are going to increase. And so we do know that the rates jump around 10%. That is fact. That is there's empirical evidence on that. And that is across the country. 85% of councils have already done this, and they do. The recycling rate does go up, because what it does is it limits the amount of rubbish that you can put out over the 2 weeks. So what you can do now is you can put as many blue bags out as you like. You can buy extra blue bags, and you can put 100 out. You probably don't have enough room on your curbside to put 100 out, but you could put a lot of blue bags out. But you'll have 1 wheeled bin, and you'll be limited to that. So if people are tempted to put recycling in their rubbish bin, they'll very quickly realize that the rubbish bin is then going to be full of recycling, and they won't have room for the rubbish. So because that's been the number one concern that's come into us through social media, we've therefore used social media to explain why that's not the case, to explain what's going to happen, we've also done the research about, some other specific councils that also use bags for their recycling, and talking about what happened when they went to alternate weekly using bags for recycling and a wheeled bin for rubbish. And we'll continue to do that. So we will, the feedback so far has been social media and then through the members' workshops, and we will be listening and adjusting and changing the messages that we put out and the questions that we answer, really. So it will be a very a two-way conversation that we want to have with residents, and we will be adjusting. So if there are concerns that you hear from your residents that we're not already talking about, please let me know, and we'll start talking about them, because we do know that there will be things that we won't have thought of. We didn't realize that was going to be the number one concern coming back to us. And again, that part is only on social media, but we still didn't realize that that would be the number one question and concern people had. So we've now adjusted what we are saying and how we're saying it to address those concerns. We have, as I said, and as Richard also said, we've got the comms plan, the phase 1 comms plan, which takes us up to early next year. But it allows for changing the messages depending on what people need to hear, what questions people have. So what we have in that comms plan is what we're going to do and when, but it doesn't necessarily have the individual messaging, because that we want to be open and flexible so that we're making sure we're giving people the answers to questions and the way to the answers to their concerns as well as we're going through this. And then you had the question about the comms approach to the households that won't be getting a wheeled bin. So they will be receiving a letter, each of them individually, and that will be telling them what's happening specifically to them. And so I don't think there won't be a change for them, so it wouldn't decrease their recycling rate. But that's a really good point, that we should include information in that letter about how they could increase their recycling rate. And yeah, so one of the things that we can do with that is we've got, you might have seen the waste composition analysis that RE3 does for us every year. And so we've got an image of a blue bag and what percentage of the blue bag is food waste, what percentage of it is plastics that can be recycled, what percentage of it is glass that can be recycled, and so on. So we can include that in the letter, so and then help for residents on how they could recycle more. It's a good idea. We'll take note of that.
Thanks, Rebecca. I mean, that's really really encouraging that it's a dynamic process, that there's engagement, two-way, engagement. And I was also really interested, in your reference right towards the end, in the use of visuals, graphics, and so forth. And I think some of them thus far, have been very engaging. So thank you for that. With your indulgence, Chair, whilst it's still fresh in our minds, I'd like to pick up a matter that Adrian raised about KPIs, okay? And I'd just like to flag up the possibility, of a recommendation, a very simple recommendation along the lines that, well, I need to preface this. My understanding is KPIs, okay, are determined by the executive member, jointly determined by the executive member and the service director. Okay, so the recommendation would be along the lines that the executive member and service director review the KPIs prior to implementation, including the project goals outlined on page 31 in this document. Okay, and I think this would be a really good sort of example of overview, of how we can contribute, to add value, at this stage in the project. So I'd just like to plant that idea, but I see that Steve has a response.
So just to be sort of really clear and precise in the language, so we have corporate KPIs, which is waste tonnages and all of that, and that goes through the normal performance. And to answer the councillor's point earlier, we have project outcomes. That was the slides about the environment and all of that. I'm quite keen that, and we've committed to, so we will need to update in due course the project outcomes. So there's just not getting confused in the language. KPIs probably should remain, but we should update on the project outcomes as the project progresses, absolutely.
Yeah, sorry to harp on about this point. When we had the meeting on the KPIs with Graham and Steve Moore said in his view, KPIs were not fit for purpose because it was just reporting tonnage, I think, and that I know you've gone into a long description of reviewing and annotating and working with other parties on the KPIs, but for us to look both at this project and the ongoing KPIs, the BAU, these these KPIs defined as project goals are very useful. And the only way we can track things in Scrutiny is to have consistent measures of things. So if you're saying at the start of this project, these are our goals, therefore our measures, then when you come back in 3 months or 6 months or 12 months, we are going to ask you, you know, hey, you set these 4 things out. How are you doing against those 4 things that you put to us?
But obviously, you know, it's the committee's recommendation in any event, and it's entirely your call. But absolutely agree with what's been said, and absolutely welcome the rigour and challenge that goes with that kind of monitoring and scrutiny. So I've no problem with that whatsoever.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, just before that, could I just check with Rebecca? I mean, I'm not sure if it's clear. The people who are keeping the blue bags, they will also be on alternate weekly collections. Is that is correct?
No, sorry. If I said that, I didn't
Okay,
mean
no,
that.
no, just wondered.
Richard
I
can answer that
wasn't quite
question.
clear. So people with the blue bags are staying on weekly collections for both recycling and general waste. Okay, thank you. Pauline.
Thank you. I'm sure you'll be delighted to know that we won't go through all, or I won't go through all the questions that I asked in the previous briefing, because you've already answered those. Alison, I think, made a very good point, and I was a bit concerned about the answer. I mean, the point about fly tipping increasing, and particularly my worry also is people using litter bins to get rid of their excess waste. I think we also need to give people a way of dealing with excess waste. We have a few residents, not many, but a few, that leave waste all over their back gardens, all over the front gardens, all over the place. If you end up with more people doing that, it can become an issue. I've certainly got one person who complains to me about fly tipping in Shinfield, which isn't even my ward, every 2 weeks. And I don't see anything about anybody dealing with the root cause. They clean the fly tipping up, and that's great. But the root cause just keeps happening over and over again, and it seems to me it's probably a cheap way of getting rid of your sofas or whatever you're collecting from people. So I'm a bit worried that you're relying solely on enforcement, because I don't think our enforcement is as good as it should be. And also I think we need to encourage people to not leave the place in a complete mess, and I just wonder what you might think about that.
So I think in response to that, the issue that was raised about fly tipping, absolutely, and you know, we can understand that. In my experience, there are those people that fly tip, and there are those people that don't, and the ones that don't probably will, never will, and that's with experience of closing, you know, household recycling centres and all of that. Tweaking the messaging, like Rebecca said, where, you know, really good and salient and insightful points come up. I think that is something that we can do to tweak the messages. The support staff that we're bringing in, the engagement officers, that is something that we can make sure that they're alive to, and that message is going through. There will be a transitional period, and there will be issues that a project like this will flush out, and we will manage those. There are sort of antisocial behaviour teams. You know, we have got the sort of the good fortune that they sit under sort of my line management at the moment, and they're within George's directorate. So, you know, we can find it really easy to look at that and look at the work that they're doing and see where that might need to be refocused in the future. And I do take that point on board.
I think it's not just fly tipping. I think I agree with you. There are people that fly tip and people that don't. But people think that putting their blue bag waste in a litter bin is perfectly legitimate, and it isn't fly tipping. People think that heaping it up in their back garden or around their front door is fine, and it's not fly tipping. How are you going to deal with these sort of things? I think we need to find a solution for people, not just rely on enforcement, because actually the enforcement doesn't seem to work to me.
No, I agree with that. And as we sort of develop, we'll we'll look at that. But behavioural change is always the key. Enforcement is always there on the spectrum, but it should never be the first point of call, especially while we're going through this sort of change period. So we're aware of that. And I think, to go back to Rebecca's point, it is about the quality of engagement. As a council, we really need to engage on this, and we shouldn't fall into a trap of a council that just transmits information. Because that won't work. So we will adjust. We will take those points on board. I think they're really key, and we will sort of tweak the work plans, the communication plans, and the briefings that we give to the new staff to make sure that we pick that up, and then we will feed that back when we revisit, good, bad, or ugly.
Yeah, we need to give people a solution, and as I say, my experience of enforcement, in the small experience I've got, and it's only a very small experience, is it doesn't seem to happen. I mean, they're very, very good at clearing up, which is brilliant, but I don't hear very much about people being fined or prosecuted or anything. Maybe it's just we don't tell people.
Well, as these things sometimes spookily coincide, Offlog are sort of consulting on waste KPIs, and 40-50% of those new waste KPIs are fly tips per 100,000, investigations, fines issued, sanctions. So we've been working on that today. I know corporately we align with that. It's still an open discussion, but certainly that is the driver coming from Offlog, and this council will have to react to that in due course. So it's on the agenda to be properly dealt with.
So, okay,
Chris.
Thanks, Chair. I'm not sure who this question goes to, but in amongst the details of the activity that's going on is the fact that the existing vehicles are being repurposed effectively so they can still do the same job. So I'm going to put the other glasses on because I can't see what I'm looking at. I do apologise. Happens every night. I do also read in there that the cost of an electric vehicle replacement is 3 times the current cost of a vehicle as it stands now. Current legislation that is in place for domestic vehicles, if for want of a better word, is there's a certain deadline for no more production of fossil fuel vehicles. For the lorries, I'm not so sure, because I do recollect that there is an exception, because heavy goods vehicles, the diesel is going to be the preferred fuel because of what it's doing, whether it's going to be biodiesel or not. So my question would be, is there any legislative pressure on you to change the vehicle stock and force an expensive item to come into the agenda at an earlier date?
So in response to that, the final slide that we've got is about the waste procurement, and there's a point on that slide that deals with those issues. But the issue in regards to sort of electrification of waste vehicles is it can be done. And in urban boroughs, those have been used and work all day, under stress. So there is a cost to those, and it's that cost. And then it's really then becomes a social pressure. So it's the optics of, is that a cost that a council could bear? And then how does it then reconcile that with a climate emergency and a declaration of an environmental strategy, and then not go down that route? So there's a social pressure in optics that would need to be, and the slide that we've got will sort of flush that out, because these are the issues that we're working through to that. Notwithstanding that the electric vehicles are heavy, and so they can cause issues, sort of bridges, culverts, and also left and right turns. They can do some damage, but that is something that we should be looking at in preparation for a new procurement.
Thanks. So the element to that question that I've got is are we aware, is the council aware, or are we aware of any legislation that's going to force the council to take an earlier decision that may affect one of your targets, which is this £1 million saving? Are we likely to be impacted by something like that?
To the best of my knowledge, that will be under no compunction to do that. It will be a choice for the council to procure as it sees fit within its available resources.
Stuart?
Yeah. Gentlemen, if I look at the sort of the page of the main goals, I'm thinking about what Adrian said. Reduction in landfill tonnage is a great idea. great idea, because there's, you can see that's going, great idea. Carbon saving, sorry, I wasn't at the briefing in person, Richard and co. Please you could explain to me where we get 2,400 tonnes of CO2. Can't remember. But great to have an idea as a KPI to increase our recycling rate. I think that's a really good thing to have. The bit that really worries me when I see the number circa in any business plan is, can you please just remind me how you'll know we're going to be on target to make £1 million in the first quarter?
So in answer to some of those points, earlier in the presentation, we've sort of assured ourselves by sort of external validation of those targets. So we can work through all of that. And as we've committed to tonight, we'll come back with updates. We'll come back with updates on that as we go. So we're quite sort of confident about that we can achieve those. Is that an absolute cast iron guarantee that we can? Well, it's a project goal and it's a stated project outcome. So we're going to give it a try to get there. But we can produce that evidence and we can move that forward. We have got a business case, so we're on sort of version 2 of that. We've updated it with some of the information that we had last week from the members' workshops. And okay, it's an iterative process because the government have also issued their sort of guidance or, direction of travel on simpler recycling. So we've adopted it to incorporate that. So that sort of revised business case has been updated and it's there. So, we have got some confidence in that, and hopefully we'll be able to sit here in the year to come to assure you and demonstrate that progression.
So can you give me a couple of the bits that make up the £1 million?
The makeup of the £1 million will also be sort of the moving to the waste collection into the fortnight. It will be that we'll be able to reduce some of the crews, be able to reduce some of the vehicles that we've done, redeploy some of the contractor staff. Also the reduction in cost that we'll incur in any sort of energy from waste or any residual going to landfill, and those contractor costs and those contract costs that we incur on that. So we do need to extract those back, and we do need to work quickly with that. And we're working really closely with Veolia and RE3 to make sure that we do that. So there is work to be done. We understand what needs to be done. There is work to be done for us to extract that value back.
Andy.
Thank you. I've got quite a few actually. So first one is really about the point Adrian alluded to, which is the cost, well, not so much the cost of the replacement bins, but who bears the cost of replacement bins which are stolen and which disintegrate, I guess, after time. So when I read the document, the detailed document was given, not the presentation, I'm basically reading that in 10 years' time, anybody who wants a new bin will have to buy their own new bin, because there's no ongoing replacement program. And so I guess sort of secondary to that is that if I buy a new house somewhere in the borough and I get to that house and there is no bin there, whose responsibility is that to provide the new bin? So I know that bins that are damaged, but this will be replaced by the borough, and I think that's an ongoing thing. But it's the bins which aren't replaced by the borough, the bins which are broken by the household or lost or stolen from the household.
Thanks. Okay, so the system or the policy that we've put in place isn't new to a lot of other councils. A lot of other councils have we've looked at, and we're going to implement it, put in a policy around saying that if the bin is broken by the crews, obviously that will be replaced. However, if it goes missing, if it's lost or damaged by the owner, then the owner of the house will have to pay for a replacement bin. In terms of the moving into a new property and the bins not being there, first of all, in the normally in the sale of a property, the bins and the receptacles are meant to be left for the new owner.
Okay.
If a new owner comes in and there are no containers there, then they'll have to buy a new bin. Does that answer your question?
It does, and 10 years down the line, or 12 years down the line, once bins are just coming to the end of their natural life, at that point, everybody will be having to replace their own bins.
Yes.
I guess thank you. That's what I just wanted to double check that. So my next thing is to do with comms, which is probably for Rebecca. So I think I'd be working on a long-term comms plan around that one, to be honest. Just to say, I appreciate the change in the diagram that I saw on the email today. That was very much appreciated, and I think it did look better. I've been looking at some of the social media interactions on the WBC Facebook page, and I don't envy the person you've got doing it, but I think they are doing quite a good job. But it was a little bit disappointing to see, I think, today that they posted something and closed off comments because they got a lot of engagement previously. And I can't help thinking, I appreciate, it's difficult to do these things all the time, but I can't help thinking that it's not quite sending the right message about engagement, especially when that the behaviour change part of it, as you've acknowledged, has always been really, really important. It's about getting people to do things differently, and people haven't realised that. And to be honest, I really struggled with it at the beginning, and it wasn't until I think we had a meeting here to look at it that we finally sort of managed to. It was like getting blood out of a stone, really. That the behaviour change was key to it. So and part of the behaviour change is going to be the storage of the green bags, and people sort of thinking, oh, have I got enough room? And I was a little bit surprised I was surprised that it was a surprise to us that it was the number one issue, because I've been getting the sense that we have been talking to other councils and we have got lots of outside expertise in who've done this sort of thing before, and now we're saying, oh, but in Wokingham seems to be different to everywhere else, because in Wokingham people are worried about how they store recycling. But I'm just trying to reconcile these two things. And is it a uniquely Wokingham thing that people are worried about storage, or what's happening?
I think it's it's the change. So I live in West Berkshire. We have bags, one bag for recycling and 2 boxes. I moved here 10 years ago and that system was already in place. Some people put out more than the 2 boxes in 1 bag, but not that many. That's what most people put out. And that is equal to less than 4 of the green recycling bags. So I think it's people's perceptions of what will be an issue, not what, once the change happens, what actually will be an issue. On the the social post today that you're referring to. So this week we had just 1 social post scheduled. It went out I think Monday morning at 7 o'clock in the morning, and by 8 o'clock in the morning it had 200 comments on it. By the end of the day it had 300 and some, and it's just, we had to turn comments off overnight. We turned comments back on in the morning, and the comments kept coming in, and that's a full-time job for someone to respond to those comments, and we don't have someone who has a full-time job of just responding to social media comments. We do have a comms officer dedicated to this project, but that post, we want people to sign up to the Rubbish and Recycling newsletter, which goes out fortnightly. And so that post was an extra post, and we intentionally turned the comments off so that we wouldn't have done it if we had left the comments on, because we didn't have the resource this week. What we have scheduled is 1 social post a week, and that's what we have allocated time for. This one, we wanted to drive people to sign up to the recycling newsletter, which is going out. It might have gone out this evening, actually.
I had one this evening.
Yeah, so it went out this evening. Sorry, I was just trying to think, is it an evening one or a morning one? But it went out this evening. So the purpose of that was to drive people to sign up to it, and it worked. So we did have people sign up today. So they received the one that went out this evening. Whereas if we had waited and on the next social post provided the link, they would have missed the one that went out this week, which did have a couple of sections on the changes. So that I fully take your point. In an ideal world, we wouldn't turn comments off because the posts are getting really fantastic engagement. And because of that engagement, they're reaching more people. But it is just a question of resources. And we will do a mixed, we'll definitely keep the social posts, or pardon me, the commenting on the posts at least once a week that we put out, and we will continue to look for. So we will be directing people to the web pages because that's where the questions are answered. So we want people to read them. We'll be directing people to sign up to the Rubbish and Recycling newsletter, but we'll also be answering questions that come up that aren't answered elsewhere, new questions and concerns, and then also just on each post we will be engaging on, so we'll be responding to some of the comments, even though we've already responded to them before, because we want people to know that we are listening, we are looking at the comments, and that we are responding to them.
Thank you. So thank you for that. So the next question is a follow-up from a question I asked in the group briefing, really, and it was again this question of the super recyclers, and it was really good to see them getting more acknowledgement. And I was just wondering, has there been any progress, or is there likely to be any progress on a scheme for the many people in my ward who are telling me, actually, I don't need a wheelie bin. I can do one blue bag equivalent every 3 or 4 weeks. And those fantastic people who do that, and a scheme which just works for them. So this question, I guess, is for Steve, because I think I asked you in the group meeting.
Thanks. I'll take that one. Okay. So yeah, you're absolutely right, Andy, in terms of what residents are doing at the moment. Our recycling rate is really good. We've got heavily engaged residents with not only recycling our rubbish, but also reducing our rubbish, which is absolutely key as well. In terms of super recyclers, yeah, absolutely brilliant concept, and we want to develop that further. But in terms of the scheme itself, the proposal, what we will be doing is distributing bins to every single property. Now, residents don't necessarily need to put their bin out every fortnight. They could leave it for a month, for instance. So
it's not the putting of the bin out. I think it's more the idea they have to store a bin that they will possibly use once every 4 weeks or once every 6 weeks, because they're literally saying we don't do rubbish. Okay. So the idea of like a red bag scheme or even a gold bag scheme, because they're gold medal residents and they deserve something. Sure. I don't know, but as long as we're still looking at it.
Yeah, let's look at that. Let's take that away and look at that in a bit more detail. Okay.
And then the last question then is the second to last rather, is in the report. It talks about the percentage of food waste being recycled going up, which is really good news. But I found it, I spoke about the move from 26% of residual to 22% of residual, something like that. And I was just wondering, is that noise? Is that, or is it a meaningful movement? I wasn't quite sure about how important it was, even though it was good.
Okay, I think you're referring to the amount of food waste that's currently in the blue bags.
Yes. Now,
as compared to last year. So last year it was 24%, and now we're in the region of about 20% of food waste. It's good as going down, but we've still got a long way to go. And then we'll be obviously pushing that as hard as we possibly can to drive it forward.
So what I was asking is, what I'm saying is that a material change that has happened as a result of all of the noise about recycling, or is it the sort of variation you would normally expect to see randomly year on year? Because I've got no idea, about the significance of it.
Yeah. So it's not attributable just to one factor. This is a multitude of factors that affect waste, including and recycling, including food waste. So the cost of living crisis, for instance, has focused people's minds in terms of how much food waste they create, and within, you can see how much you can physically see how much you're chucking away in the food waste caddy. If you just normally have a blue bag, you put it in there, you wouldn't notice it, but you will notice it going that direction or that system. The other point is we've put out a lot of comms. We've put a lot of comms out in terms of our recycling rate. We need to improve. We need residents on board. They're absolutely on board and engaged, and we are pushing hard. So that's another factor that's actually reducing the food waste.
Thank you. That will be it for me.
Okay, that's it. Right, Adrian, then Caroline.
Sorry, I just want to go over this with a bit of a microscopic detail. The replacement of a bin. How does the resident, or how does WBC prove that the resident or the recycling operative broke the bin, or broke the lid came off, the wheel fell off? How do we prove that? Bearing in mind, when we had the black boxes, my wife used to be very precise with all the black boxes and very neatly put them out. And then when the operatives came, they were thrown around. The handles broke off, the case got cracked. My wife would always say I treated them appropriately, but the operatives, because they're time efficient, throw them around. So therefore, it is highly likely that the operative, rather than the resident, broke the bin. So how are we going to prove that the resident broke the bin?
Okay, thanks, Councillor. I think the first point is that it's really disappointing to hear about the contractor's performance in terms of throwing things around. That's absolutely not the case, and we will be following up with them on that. The second point is around the bins and determining if the crew broke the bins. So all of the Veolia vehicles have got CCTV on them, and they'll be able to tell from when they pick up the bin to where it puts on the back, and if it goes into the back of the vehicle, because sometimes that can happen, or it's broken by the crew by some reason, then we can determine that approach.
Can we have in the comms that the replacement policy will include the footage from the CCTV on the bin lorries, which will show the state of the bin prior to the bin being emptied, and then the state of the bin after the bin was emptied and where it was left? Please, can you include that? And one more question. I think I can talk for every single councillor in this council, and probably every single councillor in every single council, in that we've had a myriad of questions over the years about bins and recycling. And some of it is negative. Now, what this does is, a councillor may generate an email to Richard or his team or something like that, and then there's huge email traffic. One of the things that we were trying to work with Jackie, who's on this call with, is reducing email traffic by using CRM systems, by using web portals in a better way. I think this is fantastic. Now, when I first saw Graham's KPI report, 5 years ago, there wasn't a single KPI relating to the customer, right? Let me be clear. The resident is paying the council tax. The resident is the customer. We must seek the resident's view, in my opinion, to understand what the customer thinks. He's paying us for a removal of his waste. You're a service partner to him. He's paying his whatever, council D, level D or whatever, DEF or ABC, whatever, and he's expecting a service. And what I want, and I'll be quite clear, what I want is for every department to have a customer satisfaction. Yeah, if you guys are incentivized to bring to your leadership team, this year we've got 82% customer satisfaction, which was better than 75% last year. I want to see every department having customer satisfaction as a KPI in its own right.
Sorry, if you don't mind, I'll come in on this because this is a customer experience question. And as you know, Adrian, because you were on the task and finish group, we did this and we're trialling it in housing, as you know, and it comes on the quarterly KPI monitoring reports to this committee. So we're seeing how it goes, and the intention is once we've trialled the pilot that we will roll it out to other teams in the council. So it's in motion.
Thank you so much. It's really crucial for me to reduce the email traffic, reduce the fannying around that every councillor does, and get real direct feedback from our customers directly into WBC.
Thank you. I was quite interested in the issues Andy raised about damaged wheelie bins, because obviously, you come home from work and the wheelie bin's wrecked and you don't know who did it. How much is the cost of a wheelie bin? And my other concern is it says replacement bins aim to be delivered within 15 working days. By my quick calculation, that's about 3.5 weeks. And of course, the bins are collected every 2 weeks. What does somebody with, a wheelie bin that's been damaged, can't be moved, do with their rubbish while they're still waiting to have a new wheelie bin delivered?
So the cost of the wheelie bin in terms of the policy is going to be £40 to the resident. A lot of other authorities charge a lot more than that. So what we want to do is cover the cost of the bin and cover the cost of delivery. That's simply it. In terms of the delivery time, 15 working days, the majority of containers are delivered within a lot quicker timescale from that. So within about 2 weeks, that's when they're normally delivered. However, there will be times when they can't get there for the collection, for instance, and then we work through in terms of alternatives to put bags out on the curbside.
Okay, that's a good answer. Andy spoke of people who will make very little. And I think the suggestion was, you might not want a wheelie bin when you make so little. And I have had residents that have said to me that they intend to share with next door. What will the mechanism be for residents to, tell us in advance, don't deliver 2, we only want 1 to share? I mean, I applaud that. It's good.
Okay, so all the households in the borough that are going to alternative wheel collections will get a wheel bin. Now, if residents want to share, then that's down to them. And then they can let us know in terms of if they want to do that, then they just put it out and they will be collected.
Okay, I mean, it would seem more efficient to me if they notified you in advance so that, you weren't delivering a wheelie bin that later had to be collected. And
I think the position around that is, I can see where you're coming from, but the position around that is going forward in future years when people move, we're still going to have to deliver a wheelie bin at some later stage. But let's look at that. I'm not adverse to that.
Okay, Caroline.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This is a very quick question. I have noticed in here you said if waste is not presented, and we have forgotten to put our bins out overnight, they're not collected, So it's marked as not presented, and it won't be collected for 2 weeks. So you've got 4 weeks rubbish. What will happen at the 4-week one? Because I'm sure they will have their wheelie bin full, but they've got extra. So how will the resident catch up? Do you have a mechanism to deal with that? Thank you.
Okay, so there are reporting lines in terms of a miscollection, and residents have to be to report within that time frame. So, you know, if the majority of the time that absolutely works. In sometimes that when residents are on holiday, for instance, and they ask the neighbour to put out the bins and they don't put out the bins, that kind of thing. And we work through that on a kind of case by case basis. And that's similar to what other local authorities do as well.
They can actually catch up with their rubbish.
It's a mechanism that they get their rubbish collected if they report in the right time frames.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, okay, Catherine?
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad we're finally getting a rubbish collection system that's approaching what I had 12 years ago somewhere else. Okay, so I've got a few comments on the education side of it. Like in the no thank you column, we could put a lot more things in the no thank you of the residual waste. The sorts of things that can be recycled at recycling centres like textiles and wood. Because I've sort of recently come across stories about people having their blue bags rejected because they're full of old sheets and things like that. So I think we could increase that list to include those sorts of things. One of my other things was soft plastics that we don't really, I know we don't collect it ourselves, but we don't have too much education on what to do with your soft plastics. Oh, I've got a little question which has come up very, very recently, that milk is beginning to be supplied in cartons with attached lids. And we explicitly say here, no lids on cartons. But we're starting to get these plastic lids on the cardboard carton. So that might be a bit of an issue. And finally, something that's come out of this, I don't know whether you've noticed on the social media that there's a lot of talk about, do I need a black bag inside my wheelie bin, which is an echo of the green caddy liner debate. And I don't know whether we're addressing that. And finally, I feel that 700 properties that have limited access is perhaps on the low side. If you think in terms of a lot of the new affordable housing, and I'm thinking of Shinfield, they have frontage, but they basically have a couple of feet of garden, well, it's hardly garden. And I don't know whether that counts as nowhere to put your bin, or whether the bins are just going to be, on that little bit of frontage and really on the pavement. Yeah, I think that's probably all the things I had to say. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Hopefully I've catched them all. So no thank yous. Yeah, appreciate the feedback on that. And if any other members have got any adjustments to make, then please let us know. That's really valid for us to change and adjust. Soft plastics, we're looking to do a trial of soft plastic collections next year at some point. At the moment, soft plastics can be taken to supermarkets and down, etc. But we're gonna try and do a soft plastics take back trial, so people put them into the green bags. Milk supplied with the plastic on top.
It's just the little the usual cap, but it's actually attached by and they actually work quite well. They stay on. But But I've just noticed in this that you're supposed to put your cartons in without the cap.
Okay, we'll look at that. We just need to understand that a little bit more. I know that on fizzy drinks bottles, etc., they have re-altered the design. So when you try to take off the cap, it actually stays on. It's quite a clever mechanism. So yeah, it's just wash and squash and then put it down, and then takes up less room in your recycling. Black bags in the wheel bins. Yep. So as per many other authorities in the country, we're going to stop the blue bag distribution, and residents will be expected to use black bags within their wheel bins. So go and purchase black bags and then put them straight into the wheel bins.
But surely not if they don't want to. I mean, they won't be compulsory, will they?
It won't be compulsory. It won't be compulsory. It's just a kind of maybe a hygiene thing, or a clean thing.
Sure.
Really, that's all.
Yeah.
And then the other item is around 700 properties. Yep, we've carried out that survey, and then, as I said, we're going to be releasing it to members for any further information as to other areas that we can need to consider further. And yeah, I'll be interested to hear about the Shinfield, your position on the Shinfield, and we'll talk about that.
Thank you.
Chris.
Thank you. When I put my hand up, I had one question. I've grown a bit, so the list has gone a bit longer. And I just want to quote something very quickly on page 19, where we've got the no thank you notices. I don't see anything about batteries, and I'm quite disappointed with that. The other thing about the batteries would be as well that a lot of the supermarkets do have these large battery boxes where they're supposed to, where we can put the recycling. But a lot of the, particularly if I take Asda as an example, it's moved from the front to the very, very back of the tills. So it's not visible. It's not easy to find. If you don't know it's there, you can't find it. So we're finding that our engagement with businesses is not getting us what we wanted. So we've got this problem now of if people can't find places to put the batteries, it's not easily found, they are going to put them in the bins, recycle them, whatever. You've lost a truck, you've had a fire at RE3, it's an expensive mistake. So maybe alter the communications on that. The wheelie bins, is there any opportunity to include stickers on there for the house numbers, or is that going to be something you're going to say you as a householder have got that responsibility, because it identifies who the bin belongs to? I know it's a long shot, but it's just a question. Then if I go to page 18 and it's 1.5, the statement in there is that if you've got households with more than one children in nappies, they can be given a blue bag and the council will supply that at no cost. Is there an opportunity for householders to purchase blue bags if they are in that position? They don't qualify under this particular item. They've got more children, are generating more waste. Are they able to purchase blue bags still and add them to the list? And if it is, will it be limited like this to one bag per household? I hope someone's taken a note so they can answer, but there you go. And then another item in there would be food caddies. The food caddies in the street, they are the ones that get damaged the most. They are literally just lobbed across the roads. They're not placed anywhere. They get damaged. I'm on my third replacement in 4 years. Are they still going to be free to replace? Because at the moment I can walk into the library and pick one up. But it's that, if we look at the policy you've got now, where you've got to replace your wheelie bin for £40, are we looking at limiting our costs? Is there any metric that you've got on the number of replacement caddies that are being issued? That's my lot.
Okay, thanks. I'll try and go through your points. So in terms of food caddies and being thrown around, absolutely not acceptable, and we will deal with a contractor on that. In terms of the numbers that we supply, yes, we do have stock checks, etc. What comes in, what goes to the outlets, and what are delivered. So we've got all that. There was another point on food waste caddies, wasn't there? I think. Cost of replacements. Thank you, George. So the cost of replacements. So there is no foreseeable policy to charge for replacement of recyclable receptacles, because we need people to be involved in recycling to ensure that we reduce our waste, increase our recycling, and therefore reduce our costs and increase or limit the impact on the environment. There's an item on batteries that you've suggested on that. So there are websites, especially the Re3 website, where you can put in certain items for recycling. So I've got, a piece of paper, I've got something like a battery, you put it in, you put your postcode in, it will direct you to where those batteries can be recycled. And we've got a battery recycling point at Shoot End as well. Stickers to householders. Yes, that will be the householder's responsibility to do that, and they can there are graphics that they can put on their bin if they wish to as well. And then nappies. I think you were saying about additional or paying for blue bags, which can be filled up with nappies and put outside.
No, if I just could get that right, because I know I threw a lot at you in one go. You currently do make a provision for households that have got more than one child in nappies to provide them with a blue bag extra for that collection, and at no charge. So my question would be, for households that have got more children or larger households, they may not have gone down the road of going for a 240 litre instead of 140. They may want to have an additional amount of waste that they've got generated that they want to get collected. It's more than goes in the one wheelie bin. Are they allowed, or are they available? Are they able to purchase an additional blue bag at the same cost that they are now to put out into the rubbish, or would that not be allowed?
Okay. So with nappies, the first point is reduce. So we do offer a voucher for residents to buy reusable nappies. The other point is, in terms of disposable nappies, the process is for 180 litre bin for a standard size, 240 litre for a larger size. We believe that would be absolutely fine to accommodate the nappies from at least 2 children. So that happens in other authorities as well. So there won't be an option for people to buy additional blue bags to put nappies in.
Can you just quickly look at page 18 and point 1.15? It's just there's a statement in there that a blue bag can be provided at no cost. So I don't, unfortunately, with that statement in there, I know that the natural progression will be, okay, you're going to get a 240 litre bin, but that will cover the situation. That this then is a redundant point. They're not going to get another bag, they'll get a bigger bin.
Okay, yeah, the point is, it wouldn't be for 1.5 households with more than one child, and nappies can apply on an annual basis for additional capacity. That wouldn't be a blue bag. The thoughts are, if they can't actually put the material within the wheel bin, so if you've got more than 2 children, for instance, then certainly we can supply something additional above and beyond. But we will deal with people on a case-by-case basis to make sure they're fully supported, and reducing the amount of waste in the first place and recycling. Does that answer?
Yeah, that gets me where we're going to. It is about getting the residents to recycle more, not put more waste out. But it's just about all of those few cases.
Of course,
you do get an excess of waste being generated because of a lifestyle, because of the fact that even there are other aspects that may be causing this. I understand about the clinical waste. There are those that are going to generate clinical waste, and that's covered separately. But occasionally there may be 1 or 2 families popping up that say, I can't cope with this, even the 240 bin's not good enough. It is, and there is no other option, then it is a case, well, they've got to get a neighbour to go down the tip for them. But it goes. Thanks.
Okay, yeah, I mean, yeah, the 1%, it causes all the trouble, doesn't it? Andy.
Apologies, this is very, very quick. So at the beginning of the presentation, I think somebody said that we were talking about distribution nodes for green bags. And I think we said that 10 parishes, towns and parishes would be distribution nodes. And I was just wondering why it was, if that's the right number, I'm wondering why it's just 10 when we have 17.
Yeah, thanks. I don't believe I stated a number. I know that we do get supported really well by partners in town and parish councils, which we're really, really grateful for. But there are further town and parish councils that we can approach to help us with supply of green bags, just to make sure the network is right across the borough. So we just don't want pockets. We want a spread.
That's absolutely fantastic. And I will send something to you and Rebecca about that as well. Talking about batteries though, and it's sort of related, I just had a look at the app. I was actually looking at this very page about batteries. And then if you look at the map of where you can do batteries, it does make very clear you can't put them in the wheelie bins. It's even got a picture of a wheelie bin, which is nice. And then it says, check out a supermarket, but there's no idea which supermarkets take them or not. And then the map is basically RE3 recycling centres. So it's at Bracknell and Reading. And it's literally drive 3 or 4 miles or find a supermarket. So the app isn't great at telling people where to do it. There's no the detail isn't there. That's just a very quick comment on that. And then when you on the app, when you go back and you say check out the RE3 website, you just get an error message on the app as well. So probably somebody wants to just go through the app and make sure.
Okay, that's useful feedback. Thank you. I did have a look this morning on batteries, and it came up with Sainsbury's, the Co-op, supermarkets, and all the rest of it in a certain area. Yeah, no, earlier I did it.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know what's happening with that, but I'll take it back to RE3.
Okay.
Okay, they could.
Do we collect batteries in our libraries? And if not, is that something we could think of doing?
Yeah, I believe we do collect batteries in some libraries. But again, it's a good point for expanding the range that we can actually collect. Yeah. So yeah, we yeah.
Okay. Adrian and then Andrew, and that's it, I think.
Yeah, just one question.
Sure.
We talked about broken bins. What about lost bins? So the reason I asked this is we live on an arterial route, and where people wander past after being at the pub and the clubs and whatever, and they have quite often moved our bin down the road or up the road, or thrown one of the boxes over a fence or something like this. Now, this is relatively okay at the moment because we have our own bin with our number written on it. But if you have a row of 10 houses and they've all got identical bins, and one is taken by a drunken person in the evening, how does any resident prove it was their bin or not their bin? And if I was a resident where the bin was missing, wouldn't I take the one next door, and then it becomes somebody else's problem? How would we prove that? Bearing in mind we've got no CCTV from the dust lorry.
Just to get, sorry to jump in again, Adrian, if you read the FAQ, it's on the website. It's on the website, and it's basically people are being advised to put the house numbers on, to decorate it, make it cheerful. And in other places, I've even seen people put the local speed limits on, as a way of advertising speed limits, which I think is a great idea.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, Stuart.
Just on the subject of bins and damaged bins, in the countryside, guys, they don't actually go with the truck to the houses at all. The gangs of guys run off with a very big wheelie bin and they run with it, which is why they're in such a rush when they get there. So there's nowhere that the bus cart is anywhere near the actual collection. So what I'd say is you're not going to get any information in the countryside about them dealing with the bins or the food caddies or whatever. They're just, in my case, they're 180 yards from the road where the truck is.
Okay, so going forward, the crew will be staying with the vehicle because they can't run up, can't go to a property grab a bin and then take it to the vehicle, because the distance would be too long, and country roads, etc. So the bins will be emptied when the vehicle alights at that particular property, and that happens with a lot of other local authorities.
No, but in the countryside, like Byward, Richard, I mean, these are driveways, yeah, and the trucks don't like going up the driveways, so they don't go up.
I think, again, it's clear in the documents that you have to leave your bin at your property edge. If you've got a driveway, you take it to the end of the driveway.
Shared.
No, the property edge is the road. Well, you need. No,
Okay, okay, sweet. Andrew.
Yeah, thanks, Al. And I think we've given this item a really good airing of more than 2 hours, and I hope that everybody's found, the contributions to be constructive, and very helpful. I'd like to just raise two final suggestions, make two final suggestions, okay, in what might be sort of an end to this agenda item. The first is that I think when we come to discuss the forward programme, that I think we should consider asking for an update, not a full project report, progress report like we've had tonight, but a pithy update, on the project. And I would suggest, that this might be, but obviously, officers are in the best position, to advise, but I would suggest probably sometime after the next election cycle in May. So that's a suggestion for to plant the idea now for when we get to the forward programme, but then also very closely linked, and this is really a question, but which might then develop, depending on the answer, might develop into a recommendation. And that is that I'd be really interested in everybody's views, members and officers' views on what value there would be in having a further round of members' briefings like those that we've had over the last fortnight. Again, one of the that we might consider in terms of timings, perhaps soon after next May's elections, in order to assist new members. It's going to be really, really important, for the new members to get up to speed on this quickly, and to help councillors dealing with questions, all councillors dealing with questions from residents as the wheeled bins begin to be rolled out. So, yeah, if people believe, that there being value in this, then I'd like to turn that into a recommendation.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah. So, should we move on? Should we move on to the
We'll vote at the end.
The market engagement update?
Yeah. I'll quickly deliver. Talked about earlier, so you'll have to bear with me, and I'll quick manic slightly. So the existing waste contract is due to be re-procured in 2026. So we need to have a new contract in place and ready to go. For a local authority, that will mean that the timeline for that effectively starts now, because to re-procure it, to go out through the market and the competition, and to put all that intelligence together and to put the contract documentation together needs to start now. Because of sort of inflation and the impact that inflation has had, it's not unsurprising that the contract, probably will cost more. We have got some levers that we can pull on that, and that is the way that we specify it, the way that we ask for it to be tendered, the way that we split value against quality on that, but it should cost more. So we need to work through that and be mindful of that and the impact that will come. We haven't crystallised our sort of approach on that, but we will be talking about that. We completed a market engagement in September. So we talked to the sort of the waste industry, and all the main sort of players in the market about what their view was. And that was about, what the current market is. Can we sort of procure the same service for a similar cost? Is there an expectation that cost would be more? How we fund the mobilisation costs of that, and how that works through. Normally in contracts, it falls into two camps. You either pay a mobilisation fee in mobilisation, or you wrap it into the sort of the overall rates over the lifetime of the contract. So that is something that we'll work through. What carbon reduction actions do we take? And what, for example, electric vehicles, they're more of a cost, but then we've got climate emergencies, then we've got environmental strategies, and then there's the social pressure and the optics that comes with that, and we need to think that through. And we need to make those decisions early, because we'll need the lead-in times for the utilities, because it might mean that you need a new substation at the depots and all that goes with that to provide that. So we need to think through those. How will we evaluate that contract? How will we split up quality against cost? And because of the way that you adjust that, will alter that decision. What contract is best for us as a council? Could that be in-house? Could it be a joint contract with another authority? Could it be a combined contract with another service? So you might put waste together with street scene, and traditionally that happens in a lot of authorities because it's a similar type of role. So we need to think through those. In the Environment Act, so we've just talked about the simpler recycling that comes through. So our intent is, and we do need to finalise this, but our intent is that we will be briefing members more on these. Quite how we package that and the sequencing of that and how we come forward on that is something that we work through. But there are things that we need to sort of talk through and get a feel from members about what their sort of strength or not a feeling is. And then we can go into that sort of contract writing, that contract authoring. But we'll need to sort of test some of those views. So we'll work on that, and you will see that coming in a short order. So that was just to let you know that this work is underway, those thoughts are active, and we'll work through some of those nuanced decisions as we go and engage members as we go on that.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Andrew, then.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Steve. In our role, our responsibility to provide overview, I think this is really yet another example, where we can contribute a significant, overview function and add value. So I'm suggesting again that we need to think in terms of the forward programme. My question is, do you have any initial thoughts, as to when it might be appropriate, both from the officer sort of point of view, and also mindful of other considerations, such as you mentioned the simpler recycling policy and so forth. I don't know, to what extent that is still sort of in flux, but it would be good, for us to have perform some of our overview, mindful sort of those kinds of other external factors, I suppose, as well. So any thoughts about timings?
Absolutely. So for me, the overview role of scrutiny, more than the scrutiny, is really important to this, because it's about product shape and product finessing, making sure that it plays out well. I mean, Andy's comments at the political briefing about you need to put the food waste collection at the beginning because that looks in the optics of that better, was really key. And it's one of those blindingly obvious things when it's pointed out to you. So, as I said, the project is already better than it was last week. So, you know, we're grateful for that. From my point of view, you know, we should be briefing members and we should be sort of engaging members with briefing notes and everything as we run up. Certainly after the election, I think your point that, you know, we do a more formal briefing then. If there are any new members, it can also comply as a sort of members induction, and it will hang together really well in the project timetable, because on the roadmap that we said that in that sort of May period we'll be, you know, start to be delivering the bins and going out. So it'll sort of give you that sort of, we're ready to go now, this is where we've gone, we've worked through some of these more issues, and it will be ready. At the beginning of the presentation said that we've come out, you know, early to members with the briefings and this, because we wanted to make sure we got enough time to do any adjustments, or if there was any significant pushback from members, we can adjust. But the timing will be right and will be closer to the event then. So yeah, we think that is the way to go.
Okay. Andy, I think Andy just wants to what?
Yeah, I've got a couple of things. First of all, and I guess it's one thing I also wanted to mention earlier when we talked about the economics of the thing, and this perhaps relates to the new procurement contract. I guess a lot of the economics and the possible savings are to do with the price which the government makes incinerator owners charge for waste that's taken. So if the government says, actually, we're not going to bother with this anymore because we don't need to, and they say it's going to be free, that blows a lot of the savings out of the water. On the other hand, if the government says we're going to double the price that charges, the opportunity costs, is it opportunity savings, whatever, will be that much greater. So there is a degree of uncertainty there. And I think in terms of the recommendations about when we should look at this again, there's actually, I think, to me, 2 or 3 different things. I think that one of them, Andrew, is the future contract, which to me sort of sits with corporate and community, and that I'm sort of thinking is a separate piece, looking at the 26 onwards. And then the second piece is this piece that we're doing at the moment, and that's a successful rollout. And again, that to me sort of sits into 2 parts. There's probably something which I think would happen before the elections to make sure that the current project is on shape and any issues that have come up to date. But then the second part of it is after the elections, when we have lots of new members, hopefully, and that's more about this thing you've been talking about earlier, which is the members supporting it. Is because I have a feeling the best will in the world, bins will still be a political issue in the elections. But if we have a new council, we can't have half the members wandering around saying this is a terrible idea, we should never have had it, and the other half saying this is great, let's do it. It's much better if everybody is at some point saying we've got to make this work, because the money will have been spent. It'll be too late to change anything. So it's not that's my, I guess, my comment on the future scrutiny is that I think there's at least 2 different things plus member training which needs to happen.
Okay, so it seems to me that we have a number of recommendations. The first recommendation is that this committee thanks all of the officers involved in the development of this project and in the presentations. Secondly, that the committee notes sorry, I'm on the wrong page. Notes the report. Yeah, I do apologise. That the committee notes the report. Okay, simple as that. Third recommendation is that the executive member and service director review the KPIs, including measurement against project goals as outlined on page 31 in the report prior to the implementation of the project, and bring those KPIs back to an appropriate overview and scrutiny committee. I'm sorry for the lengthy wording, but I hope that captures the gist of it. And the third the fourth recommendation. No, I think the other the fourth recommendation does pertain to members' training, and that is that the committee recommends that there be a further round of members' briefings soon after next May's elections. The other matters of bringing that progress back to overview and scrutiny, I think I would suggest we discuss when we look at the forward PAP programme. So I'm suggesting 4 recommendations.
When you say members' briefings, do you mean the political briefings or do you mean members' training?
When I thought this and proposed this, I envisaged something identical, really, to the members' briefings that have just taken place, I think, over the last 2 weeks. So, yeah. So, shall we have a proposal?
Can we add other recommendations? I feel that within these service standards, I think some good points were made about how a resident, can prove it wasn't their fault. And there was mention that CCTV evidence should be produced, and I just wondered if that could be incorporated into this service standards.
We can certainly look at
it simply says, as we've read that, damaged, lost or stolen, you'll have to pay the cost of replacing it.
We can certainly come up with a form of words that picks up the sort of the intent and the issues that members wrote. So we can work on that, but we can come up with a form of words that just expands that a little bit more.
Be good. And certainly that it's essential, as Chris pointed out, that batteries are included in the products, not to be put into the black wheelie bin, and to endeavour to provide more facilities right across the borough to make it easier for people to simply regularly drop off their batteries.
Chair, is it okay if I respond to that?
Yeah.
The reason being, all of those and many, many other suggestions that have been made tonight will appear in the minutes, okay, and will be considered, by the officers. I think we need to separate out those kinds of really important issues from the wider recommendations. So otherwise we end up with an enormous, list of recommendations that actually end up missing out things. So that would be my approach.
Are you happy, Alison, with those? I mean, they're all recorded in the minutes, and the officers are going to take those sort of questions on board. If that's okay. Chris.
Sorry, Chair. Just so it does go in the minutes, I don't think people appreciate that the throwaway vapes are actually have lithium-ion batteries in there, and they are fire risk. I think that needs to be documented somewhere as well in the literature. It's not an action other than that. Thank you.
Okay, and Catherine.
Well, just provoked by this battery and vape thing, are you thinking of having a sticker on the wheelie bin saying what you can't put in it?
Chair, if it's okay, I'd like to respond. And this is not in order to try to curtail discussion, but we have so many ideas, more ideas, that will continue to emerge. Okay, this is not the end, of the process. And we've had an invitation tonight, to communicate and continue to communicate and engage with officers, sharing our ideas and those of residents. And these kinds of ideas such as the stickers, on bins, I think would be welcomed. So I would suggest, okay, that we take up the offer, of sharing, these constructive ideas, with the officers.
Okay, so we've got 4 recommendations, proposed and seconder. Should we just wrap that up by, do we agree with the 4 recommendations? All those in favour?
Yes.
Okay, let's wrap that up. Great. So thanks everybody for your time and your input, and no doubt we'll see you all again. Right. Right. So move.
Yeah. If you could remind the presenter that we've all seen and read this, and don't need a long introduction.
Yeah.
We really don't need a long introduction.
Okay, so agenda item 51.
Okay.
Agenda item 51. It's unreasonable.
Excuse us. Thank you.
Unreasonable persistent complaints policy. So we have a draft here. I think we've all read this. So anyways, pass over to Sarah.
Yeah, I'll introduce the report. Thank you very much. So this draft policy, it sits as part of the wider complaints process and alongside the complaints policy, which is on the council website. Just to be clear, this draft policy, once it comes into place, it's not to deter people from complaining. And in fact, we have actually made it easier for people to express their dissatisfaction with the council. So I just want to make that really clear. This is about managing expectations and setting standards of behaviour. We are not always going to be able to give residents the answers they want. As much as we would like to, we're not always going to be able to do that. And whilst this is about people continuing, they've got their answer and they've been through the process, them continually asking isn't necessarily going to change that. In some very rare circumstances, this is also about a process for protecting staff as well. The current policy that we have does need modernising, but to give you an idea of how infrequently it is used, in the last 8 years it's been enacted 3 times, so it is very, very rare. But it is important that we do have a defined policy should we ever need to use it. I'm going to hand over to Lewis now, who give a little bit more detail before we move to questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Hello, everyone. Committee members that I haven't met before, colleagues and those that are at home. My name's Lewis Borges and I'm Head of Customer Experience and Change here at Wokingham Borough Council. So Sarah gave a really good intro. As she was saying, this isn't a new policy, it's an existing one. We've just updated it and brought it up to modern day times, and that's in line with the Ombudsman as well. We've also been through certain channels before we've got here in terms of the Specialist Corporate Complaints team, which I look after, so the specialists within that area. We've also consulted with our internal complaints forum, ECLT, and many of the heads of service. But we wanted to bring it here today for the overview and scrutiny part so that we can get feedback and comments. And as the chair has said, I believe that you've all read it, and you might well have some questions. We've answered the question from Councillor Cowan earlier in the day, and we're quite happy to field more questions. I just would like to reiterate that this is like a a policy that sits in a family of policies, particularly within the complaints approach and the process that we've got. And we're relatively successful in that process. And when I mean success, as in reaching customer satisfaction, particularly at that early resolution stage before we meet the formal stage. And we have been doing that for about sort of 7 or 8 years now as a development on our corporate complaints process, and we've brought that a long way. And this is a continually developed policy as well. So we're always open to sort of feedback and looking to get some more before we take it through to the formal channel and sign off at executive. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay. So I've got questions here. Thank you very much for that. Got questions from Andrew.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Sarah and Lewis, for your presentations. Firstly, I'd like to say that one of the things that I looked at very carefully was the language, and I am a layperson, but I felt that this would probably pass the plain English criteria, and I think that's really important. Okay, so I'd like to acknowledge that. Okay, I note that this is a refresh document. Okay, and my initial thought was, what changes have been made in this iteration compared with the previous documents? And it wasn't altogether obvious, not always. So I'd like to just make a suggestion, plant an idea, that whenever we are presented with refresh documents, would it be possible to use just a really simple method in the latest iteration to draw attention very clearly to any lines or paragraphs that have been changed from the earlier version, just so that it's really clear, to us where to look, for the changes, to make it much easier, to identify changes from one to another version. There was in the answer that was given to Councillor Cohen's question, there was a very important matter that was acknowledged. Okay, and I think I heard officers acknowledge this. I'm talking about an appeals process. Okay, and I've looked back through the document again. I can't see an obvious reference to an appeals process. I think that that does need to be looked into. Okay, and I think it would be very useful. I think members of this committee would appreciate some feedback from officers after you have looked at this issue to suggest how it might be addressed, not so that it comes back for further necessarily for further scrutiny and so forth, but just so that we are kept, kept informed. So they're the comments, that I have. Thank you.
But before the officers come in, I just wanted to firstly pick up on a few of those things. So the language, thank you for making that point. I know Jackie and Lewis work really, really hard on this, and it is so important. Too often our documents have council speak and jargon in, and Jackie and Lewis and their team are the examples of best practice in our organisation as to how we do that. So thank you for picking that up in particular. In terms of the previous versions to compare, that's a really good point and one we can take away for future reference. In terms of the appeals process, it's something we've obviously picked up and we'll go away and consider. Just something to bear in mind, if you look at the process that goes through to as part of this policy, this does go all the way up to corporate leadership team and the chief executive officer. So we have to consider actually what would an appeal look like when it is going to the very highest authority in this organisation as it is. It's something to bear in mind. I'm sure Jackie knows want to come in with this, but I certainly don't see any problem in maybe anything that comes out of today's meeting. We can certainly send something back to the chair of the committee with any comments once we've looked at things. But Jackie knows that if you want to add to that.
No, I agree, Sarah. I mean, you know, one of the reasons that we come is obviously to get feedback from the committee on how we can improve. So it's a fair point. Sarah's quite right, though. It does go to the most senior officers in the council, because obviously we don't treat this lightly. We as Lewis has already said, we've only done it less than a handful of times over the last few years. We've had to find the need to do it, unfortunately. But this policy now tightens that up, which means it does go to senior officers. But absolutely take your point. It is a good point, and it's something that we will definitely take away. So thank you for that.
Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Just a thought that's come to me, and if you look at page 52, and it's about the complaint process and about it kicking off, the starting of it. If we take a consideration of a resident has raised a complaint, they've raised an observation, and it's been answered properly by the officers. So it's a two-pronged attack here with this question. What process does an officer start when he feels that a complaint is progressing beyond the reasonable and it is a complaint that needs to be dealt with under this process? Is there local management, a department head that initially will triage that data to make sure that, one, the correct answers have been given, that there isn't a misinformation being passed on to the resident, and that the resident has been dealt with fairly by the officer that's raising the issue that a complaint process needs to be started? That's the first section. If you want to answer that one first, because the second bit kicks in afterwards.
Yes, certainly. What I would like to assure the committee is that we have a whole raft of experts and specialists from our corporate complaints team embedded in the service for a start, and we offer a huge amount of training and support for people that not only deal with some of the dissatisfaction, and that's what it is normally, how it starts before we get into the formal complaints process, but through the complaints forum we do a lot of sharing and learning through that so that we can provide better service. But to answer your question specifically, if a council officer started to have concerns that someone was being unreasonable, that would absolutely come through to the head of service. Now, the corporate complaints team, or the customer relations team as they're currently known, for have an open line to them. They're regularly contacted, particularly on sort of handling difficult complaints or certain amount of dissatisfaction. But for myself as head of service, we have a really good network with our other heads of services, and I'd expect a conversation before that. There's no way that we would start making comments of you're going to be placed as or considered unreasonably persistent. It would be an internal discussion over actually looking at certain behaviours and contact and the patterns against the criteria that we've set out way before we get down that road, because the idea is not to put someone into a box if they're voicing dissatisfaction. It's to hear the complaint through the right process, through the right channels, and hopefully they feel heard and listened to.
Thank you for that. That is reassuring. But the second part of this is what happens if a council member has been involved by a resident who doesn't feel their complaints the questions are being dealt with properly, but they are already under the watchful eye of the officers, or a process has already started.
Do you want me to say that, Lewis?
Yes, please. Yeah, I'm not sure if the last bit of that question dropped off or not. I didn't quite hear it.
No, that's fine. So just to clarify your question, so it's a resident and there is a member also involved with the complaint, and you feel that the complaint hasn't been answered, so it wants to be pursued. Is that the right question? We can't hear you, I'm afraid.
Looks like the microphones might have gone. Oh no, we just heard something then.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
yes, we can.
Yeah.
I'll get closer. So the question of that is if we've got a situation where a resident is in this process of being assessed because of a complaint has gone beyond the reasonable, if we are not as members going to be aware of this, and we don't expect to be made aware of this because it is a private matter. It's not something we need to be flagged up and say, look out, you've got somebody in Shinfield giving you grief.
Sure, of course.
It's if a member is then championed or used as a champion on behalf of that resident and comes forward with this complaint again, will the members be made aware early enough, or that there is a complaint already being dealt with? Because it's a case of we've got to physically face these people in the street at their doors, and we don't want to be on the wrong end of an issue.
Absolutely, fully understand that. So if the resident has asked the councillor to be involved and act on their behalf, as long as the resident has given authority to act on their behalf, then yes, of course, absolutely, we would go through the processes that we have taken, or the steps that we have taken to diligently answer the complaint from whichever stage it's come in at. So it may have come in at stage 1, which is the formal first stage, or even if it's a more complex complaint, it could well have come in at stage 2. So yeah, the answer to your question is yes, we would absolutely, as long as the resident has given consent to obviously share information with the councillor at that point.
Thank you.
Okay, Adrian.
Yeah, I thought the draft was a very good draft. From the description, I think Jackie's giving, it's more iterative than just a simple block diagram that's described. So I wouldn't make the diagram really complicated with a really process flow diagram explanation with, you've got this appeal level, then that appeal level. This format of documentation's fine for me. I'm happy with this. I'm also happy that you're clearly stating that if they're still not happy, they can go to the LGSCO. The one piece I don't like is box 3 on page 55, which is who will decide if somebody is unreasonably persistent. Now, this is going to be a political issue. Councillor Cowan's question was clearly a political issue. The councillor is involved, but there is no representation from the political side making this decision. So this is the director of the service, the chief executive, and the CLT. That to me doesn't include, the leader or the deputy leader of the council. I would like to see some political representation in that box, so that very hot political topics can be stated in that box.
Can I, before officers coming, I just want to understand this a little bit more. Sorry, I'm just curious, because surely putting politics into the dynamic means it's not going to be seen impartially, and officers are impartial in terms of politics. As soon as you put politicians of a particular party in, particularly if they're coming up for re-election, then that might have an issue with the process. That I don't know, that's what springs to mind immediately with me.
I mean, perhaps I think you make a really good point, but I think, at that final meeting, at that judging meeting, in my business, we do judging meetings every day. And at the judging meeting, you always have both parties, have advocates for and advocates against, essentially. So the judge can hear both sides of the argument. If you only have the officers, are you going to clearly understand the political side? I think that would be deficient. That's just a personal view.
Can I agree with Sarah? I think you'd end up, it would be a bit like having the standards board with only the leader of the council on it. It wouldn't be appropriate to have the political, it's best if the political people are well out of it. I agree with Sarah.
I think what we'll do, if that's okay with you, Jackie and Lewis, is one of the queries we can take away, and we'll have a think and come back with a response, because I think that's got many layers of things to consider there. Jackie, do you want to?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine. We'll definitely take it away. My only question around that we're going to need to go and check, obviously, is data protection. So it's about sharing details of somebody and somebody's complaint, because if we would need to seek additional assurance or advice or an appeals process through a councillor, a member, whoever, we would need to make sure that we weren't breaching any data protection rules, because we're sharing personal information essentially. It may not be an issue, but we'll absolutely take it away and consider it. So, because it's a good point. So thank you.
Can I come back in? I think it's a really bad idea. I understand what you're trying to achieve, which is to get some balance in it rather than it being officers versus the public. I understand that, and I can understand why you want to do that, but I really don't think it's appropriate to have politicians involved in it. I think there might be other solutions. So maybe if we step back from the solution and articulate the problem, which is that you don't want it to become a whole load of senior council officers ganging up on a resident with nobody mediating on their behalf, which I think is the problem you're explaining. Maybe have that as the problem and ask the officers to go away and find a solution to.
And I come back on that point. You make a good point as well. What I'm trying to make sure, and I think we had you mentioned 3 cases. So this is the extreme end of your processes. This is not a daily occurrence. It's a, once in a year, once every 6 months scenario, which is great. It's great to hear that it's a very infrequent subject. But I'm always slightly cynical, and I look at that and I think, if for some reason a director of service wanted to bury something, in that step, it may be achievable to bury something without any political oversight. What we are doing in this meeting is we have Harsken and Children's Services, Climate Emergency Scrutiny. More and more things are being scrutinised, and I would argue, we're going into more details than we've ever done before in terms of political scrutiny of what the officers and the directors are doing. But at this step, we have no scrutiny. Well, that's what it says here. There is no scrutiny of this step from the political side, and that makes me uncomfortable.
Can I just point out that residents have the opportunity to go to the Ombudsman?
Pauline.
I don't know. Does this policy equally apply to everybody, every resident, including councillors? Because councillors can't go to the Ombudsman, I believe. So that's just one thing to bear in mind. I do understand what you're saying completely. I've been involved with 2 residents over my time on the council who have become vexatious complainants. In both cases, they became unvexatious complainants again. It wasn't about what they were complaining about that the officer had an issue with. It was how they were being complained to. And once that was sorted out, actually the points that both residents were making were completely reasonable. It was just the way they were doing it that was the problem. So there's got to be some sort of feedback education thing which takes them on one side and said, look, the way you're approaching this is wrong. You'll have a much better effect if you do something slightly different. And I think I'm just sharing some experience of having seen a couple.
Just on that, we acknowledge the fact that in the past the term vexatious has been used. We're not using that term anymore. It's not the right language to be using anymore. There's another point I was going to make there. This process, it's not just a case of a decision is just made. There is a whole process, as you'll see through this, that gets there. It's not going to suddenly happen without those conversations happening with that resident in the first place.
Okay, Caroline.
Thank Thank you. It's just a clarification. On page 53, you talk about requiring face-to-face meetings. You said in presence of a witness. Is the witness independent? Is it chosen by the complainant or a council officer? And are they independent, helping both sides? I just wanted to know who the witness was and how they were chosen. Thank you.
I'll ask Jackie or Lewis to come in on that, please.
Jackie?
Sorry, trouble unmuting then. I was just reading that section on page 53 in terms of the witness.
It can be an advocate, so it can be someone's advocate. So that refers to the face-to-face meeting, doesn't it? Yes. So it can be an advocate chosen by the complainant. Equally, if the officer isn't comfortable, then again, the officer could also have an advocate. So there could be sort of 4 people in the meeting, but it doesn't just happen. That would be within with the agreement, obviously, of the complainant and obviously of the officers concerned. So it's not supposed to be like a panel. It's supposed to be to try and alleviate any tensions or any issues so that we can go forward and have a kind of better relationship with the complainant.
Thank you.
Catherine.
Yeah, thank you. Forgive me if this is covered, but I've recently come across a resident who uses the complaints process to basically ask for services. And I don't see that in any of the examples. So would it be vexatious?
Well, it definitely wouldn't be vexatious.
He's a council tenant, so
yeah, it definitely wouldn't be vexatious. It could be an unreasonable request.
Well, absolutely. I couldn't think. Yeah, unreasonable.
But I think it would all depend on the merits and what the request of service was. Certainly in all of my time of dealing with complaints on and off in my time at the council, which is more than sort of 12, 13 years, requests for service haven't featured in the like the unreasonably persistent or vexatious. So I think I'd probably need a bit more information on that one to answer that one more accurately. But certainly within tenants, obviously we very much are working with the housing team in particular, and they've got a couple of officers in there that deal with sort of dissatisfaction and corporate complaints to really bring up the customer satisfaction piece, because that also sits under mine and Jackie's area, and it was referenced earlier with waste as well. That is something that we are, through the customer excellence strategy, we're trying to drive up through satisfaction and our GovMetrics measuring. But housing is definitely one of those ones we're working on. I appreciate I've deviated from the topic there, but it is important to cover, because I think I think from that particular example you were saying, I think it's a level of dissatisfaction that they're representing, and then hoping to alleviate that with an improved service, or maybe even a service that wouldn't normally be offered. But I'm just making assumptions there. But I'm happy to look into it if you wanted to send me some more information.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Andrew. Oh, so Chris then.
Thanks, Chair. Just coming back to Pauline's observation about we are residents, but we're also councillors, so we can't go to the ombudsman. I would imagine if we were dragged into or part and parcel of an issue like this, where we have, as a resident, made some observations, and we're considered to be a complainant, that we would be pulled out of this branch into the standards issue. It wouldn't be us councillors being pulled through this particular process. We would be peeled out and put through the standards process.
That's correct. Yeah, different process. Yeah.
Okay, Andy.
Thank you. So a couple of things. On page 52, and it's just over halfway down, and it talks about the Information Commissioner's guidance. And one of the points there, I think, is the 5th point or 4th point, says, is it likely that the request is designed to cause trouble? And I'm sort of thinking from an information point of view, yes, perhaps if someone said they wanted to know each time, I don't know, a village was mentioned or a road was mentioned, that would be just time wasting thing. But I'm trying to think, with a legitimate complaint, it's either legitimate or it's not. I'm struggling to understand what that would cover, and if you could give any examples of. Exactly, it's a little bit weird, that one. And then I'll do all of them if it's okay. And then the other one was where was it? Communication has been maintained with the complainant. And again, is that annually or 6 monthly or what's the criteria by which we're going to measure that communication has been maintained? They're my two main ones, if that's okay.
Sorry, Andy, what page is the communication being maintained? Which one was that on, please?
So it's right at the bottom of page 52. It's page 4
I
of
see.
the policy.
I see. Yes. Thank you. So in terms of communication being maintained, that would essentially be around maintaining a good relationship with the complainant. So, oh, sorry, this is about them being unreasonably persistent. Yeah, so this is about regular communication with them and keeping them updated. So before we consider whether their class is unreasonably persistent, we need to make sure that the complaint has been investigated properly, any decisions reached have been followed properly, communication has been maintained, and that just means keeping them up to date. So, we haven't taken their complaint and then left it for months and months and months without. So if there's been any maladministration in the way that we have handled the complaint, then of course that would cause frustration for the complainant, and would, even though it would probably, if their behaviour was unreasonable, there would be a reason for them to behave unreasonably if we hadn't answered their complaint. So we need to obviously keep them updated. The causing trouble. Lewis, did you want to answer that one? Are you okay with me?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I think the causing trouble, to give a specific example, Andy, would probably be a bit difficult this evening. But I think in the context of what the ISO are doing, it's the causing trouble element is around potentially exhausting council officers' time on particular issues. So going out of their way to maybe drip feed certain questions and answers when it could all be in one package to be able to answer. Because I think that the whole concept of the complaints process and dealing with dissatisfaction or very serious complaints is to try and reach a satisfactory resolution as soon as possible. And I think that's the element of trouble. That's what I take from it. But I appreciate it could be a bit subjective.
Okay, thank you. And I'm glad you mentioned the timing, because my third one was about what was it? I've written it down. I will go to somebody else because my computer's gone flat, and I'll have a think about it because I've got one more.
No problem, Andy. No problem.
Okay, Adrian.
Yeah, sorry, getting back to this definition for trouble, I think this is a weak spot actually. So if you're saying it's about workload, you could reword it something like excessive and unnecessary workload.
Yeah, that's good. Fair point, Adrian. We can look at that. I think that's just kind of like one example of trouble in terms of, but that's just the first thing that I kind of associate with it.
Okay, Andy.
All right, I've remembered what it is. So in a couple of places, it talks about introducing new information.
Yes.
And I guess I'm worried that there might be people with a genuine complaint who aren't necessarily very good at gathering evidence and writing things down. And we've all had the residents, and you get a massive, great big story, and it's like War and Peace in words. But crystallizing an issue is not something they're necessarily good at. And my concern is that there were people who've got a genuine complaint, but the lack of ability to crystallize that complaint, and either the revelation as a result of what something an officer has said, or a case where genuinely new information is coming to light that they didn't realize, and that sort of genuine recall of things which are relevant as they progress through the process is going to see people like that who no fault of their own are in danger of being labelled as unreasonable.
Yeah, thanks for your question, Andy. I think we must, as a council, make reasonable adjustments, and that's and to me that would be a reasonable adjustment, and it would be on a sort of case by case basis. What I think the whole process isn't to stop someone from complaining. I think that's the perspective that I just really want to get across to the committee, and hopefully that has come across tonight. If when new information is presented, then absolutely that could alter the approach, the process of that particular complaint. And I think we have to make reasonable adjustments for that. And it's not a one size fits all policy. This policy is around trying to set out our approach so that there's a better understanding of how actually, if it did get to that extreme point, this is potentially the approach that we will take. And again, it is all potential, like 3 cases in 8 years. It's like one every 2 years or so. So it's not an extreme amount, but absolutely, I would expect that if any new information was presented, it would be looked at. I don't think that it would. Certainly in my times of even with the unreasonably persistent complaints that have been in that category, we've always read the correspondence. That's, it's not like they're blacklisted or blocked like a WhatsApp message or anything like that. So I'd like to be able to give some assurance on that absolutely, if new information is presented, then it would be considered. However, it might not actually alter the course of that particular approach and process. Don't know if you want to add anything else to that, Jackie.
No, it's fine.
Okay, Adrian.
Yeah, just a re-clarification of that wording. Thanks to Chris, he's helped me out on this one. So instead of saying trouble, we could say excessive or unnecessary or disruptive actions.
Yeah, that's really good feedback. Thank you. And we could even feed that back to the ICO, because I think we've taken that sort of directly from them as well. So we could be pioneers in the language and make some headway there. Thank you for that suggestion.
Okay, Andrew.
And I'm going to blow my own trumpet because I actually used almost identical words, unnecessarily, unusually disruptive, so yes, so I think we're on the same wavelength. Now, I think this has been, again, another example of, some really, hopefully very constructive discussion. I've reached the conclusion that I think there are quite a number of tweaks, that have been suggested tonight. Some of them are probably more challenging than others. But and they would include, for example, thinking through the appeals process, giving more thought to a suggestion that was made about possible councillor involvement. And so all these things need to be looked at very carefully. Regular reporting and recording needs to be documented. Okay, I think also something that's been missing from here is that it was just last week that at Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny Committee we looked at our complaints and compliments annual report, so I don't know, to what extent, this is replicated in other service areas, but I think that, we need to acknowledge, that it's part, I guess, of a kind of a package, isn't it? The final thing, which observation I'd like to make, and then I'd like to make a recommendation. But the observation I'd like to make is, I think the introductory paragraph is really good, but I think it could stress even more so that, the objective is to get a satisfactory resolution, to the concerns, okay, and that's the purpose. That it's to assist all the stakeholders, to achieve a positive, satisfactory resolution. So I'd like to see that sort of emphasised. So, given there are quite a number of, I think, again, really helpful suggestions have been made. What I'd like to suggest in this instance is that once the officers and exec members have time to sort of mull all this over, and I know that this, this could take quite some time, okay, that they feed back to all members of the committee, and then at that point we decide whether or not to have another formal look at the next iteration, and so forth. But so that would be my my suggestion for a way forward. So
could I just come in there? We are taking this to executive, I believe, before the end of the calendar year. Just so you're aware, that's our time frame for this. So I don't know if there was another Scrutiny Management Committee to bring back another version of this before then. But we will certainly write back to the committee with responses to that and where we've been able to make changes and what we've done, and if we haven't, why, and that feedback. So,
Pauline.
Yeah, I think, Sarah, the comments have been interesting, but I think they're relatively minor. To me, the policy is very good. It can always be improved. I hope you'll take some of the feedback on board, but I don't really want to see it again.
Take that as being satisfied. No, thank you. Appreciate the comments.
Nicest possible way.
It's like a persistent and unreasonable representation of agenda items.
I think that's a thumbs up, Jackie and Lewis.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks, Will. Thank you for your comments.
Okay, thanks. So I think can the committee recommend that?
Sorry, Chair. Before we do that, Andrew mentioned a very, very good point, which is that children's and overview and scrutiny. There was overview and scrutiny of what did you call it? Complaints and
compliments annual review.
Yeah, okay, complaints and compliments. I have not seen that for any other directorate. So the recommendation one of the recommendations should be that every directorate includes a complaints and compliments to the relevant scrutiny committee. So I'm thinking about health, so adult social care should go to health with complaints and whatever you said. But every directorate should do it to the relevant overview scrutiny committee, in my view, because this is where we're getting information from our customers.
Neil.
I think for information, we did have a report in the summer, which was the corporate complaints report, which came to this committee. So I'm happy to send that round to you.
But I'm not sure that was really the level of detail we're talking about here.
If you could maybe feed back to us based on the report that you received, what more detail you're after, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, just very briefly, okay, what I would suggest, is that the minutes they referred, to the fact that there is a children's services complaints and compliments committee, and that this be drawn to the attention, of the chairs of other overview and scrutiny committees, including HOSC and so forth. Yeah, for their service area.
Okay, so could I just propose then that we take the recommendation on page 45, plus we add to that the officers will look at the comments that have been made at that meeting and take them on board.
Yeah. Seconded.
And we need to thank the officers and the folio holder in our recommendations.
Well, anyone or
Okay, that was unanimous. Thank you all very much. Moving on to item 52.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The council motions. Right. Oh, yeah, Neil's going to say a few words.
So this is the report that you asked for each November. So we've listed all the motions which were approved by council over the past 2 years. And in Appendix A, there's a quick summary of progress against each one. There were a few gaps in the report that came out, but I sent round an updated version today electronically, and there were some hard copies at the table at the start of the meeting. So Andy may not have got that. So it's here for you to consider the progress, and if you wanted any more information or questions, then we can take it away and provide that.
Okay, so Alison.
I'd simply say I think this is a really useful document. Thank you to Neil for putting it together. And I think it would be beneficial if this was shared with all members, because, you know, these are the motions that we all voted on. And I think everybody's interested to know that, you know, the result has come from it.
Okay, that sounds a very good proposal that all members should receive this. Andrew.
Yeah, I agree with Alison. You know, I think this is a really important initiative, and I think it's something which should be emailed in its own right to all councillors, rather than you know, a simple link to you know, to the agenda pack. Okay, I think it's also really encouraging and a credit to all of the stakeholders who've been involved, you know, in achieving the progress on you know, on virtually all of the motions. In the few exceptions, you know, are those seem to be those that are some of the more recent, you know, works in progress, you know, as it were. I think there are just a couple of things, though, that need to be settled, not necessarily tonight, okay, but I think there does need to be a decision about how we can report simply and clearly when a motion is regarded as being completed, recognizing that that is very, very difficult, you know, because some, you know, have a definite completion criteria. Others, you know, are in a sense possibly even more permanent, you know. So it's not an easy issue, but I think we need to have some way, you know, of recording when we believe, you know, something has been completed. I think also very closely linked to that, that we need to get some sort of agreement, again, not necessarily tonight, although we might want to share some thoughts about when a motion will be removed from the action tracker. So, but apart from those sorts of practical, you know, matters, I think this is a really, really good piece of work. Again, important piece of work, and thank you to everybody who's been involved in it.
Okay, so and Andrew.
Yeah, I've got a couple of comments on this. One is on my motion 500. So yeah, you're right, Neil, I haven't seen it. So one thing this doesn't say, and I have raised it with the executive member, is the motion is very specific in that it asked for responses to petitions to be included, and the responses to petitions have not been included, and I suspect that is because the list of data points, if you like, is gathered from their system. So they've gone through the system, done an export, but unless one requests something via the online system, that way of reporting excludes petitions. And I think it's the petitions people are really, really sort of stressed about. So the executive member has said that they are going to include that before the end of the year. but there is something which is missing. And then the second thing is make the borough a recognised borough city of sanctuary, the city of sanctuary thing. And it's an extraordinary write-up because it seems to migrate, if I can use that word, between migration and refugees. And they, although being a refugee is a form of migration, not all migrants are refugees. Many migrants have just come from France for a job or something like that. You're not a refugee. And I don't mean that what you lot normally mean. I mean, you can be settled in France, lifelong French citizen. If you come here or come from America or Australia, you are a migrant. And I'm guessing you're part of the 5,000 people, but you're certainly not a refugee. And it's not clear from this whether we're saying there are 5,000 people in Berkshire who are refugees or 5,000 who are migrants. No, it's still about 5,000 people in Wokingham. So we're saying there are 5,000 refugees in Wokingham who would need to benefit from a city of sanctuary status. That's just not correct. I don't believe that. I'm astonished that we're mixing these things up. What this doesn't say is what progress has been made towards applying for city of sanctuary status. It is not just a badge. There's a process, and you have to. It's like white ribbon. There's a process that you have to go through, and I can't see anything here about the actual process because it is not just buying a badge and whacking it on your website. There's an application process. I can't see anything here on that. So my feedback on this would be, what are we doing on the actual application for that status?
Is it on the next page?
Okay, I mean, we're making notes on this, so Pauline.
Can I suggest that rather than going through each individual action and progress on each individual motion, that actually the right question is, what's the process if the petitioner is not happy with the progress on the motion? Because I can see Rebecca Marget's motion on the Lions, the action seems to be exactly what we discussed we didn't want in the motion. So, you know, the action as documented here does not fulfil the spirit or the letter of the motion. So rather than discuss each one individually, can we have a process for what we do if we're, or what whoever it is who put the motion forward does if they're not happy with it?
I think with the Lionesses, when it was pretty much what I said at the time, but there you go. Yeah, well, the motion was rubbish, wasn't it? Let's face it.
Motion.
I think the idea that the council's going to tell schools they've got to lay on training when
Andy,
they can't even
that was the motion. It doesn't matter what you think about it. The motion was passed.
Okay, we can't relive that council meeting. So that's I think that's a good point to make, isn't it? The process to make note of that. Andrew.
Yeah. No. I think another way in which this document could be used very usefully, by members, is to stimulate further questions. About querying, specific progress made on the motion that they presented, and asking for sort of guidance, thoughts, and so forth as to what the next steps, would be, and so I think it's useful from that point of view as well, and another reason for ensuring that every member, is circulated to the document.
Yeah, Adrian.
First of all, I thought, I think Neil, have you done all the work on this, Neil, or not? Because I thought this was an impossible task at one point. So thank you hugely for all the work you've done, and for everybody who's helped you. Sorry, to go back to Andy's point, which I know is a bit pernickety, in the detail between a refugee and a migrant. I went to the Reading Council where they were announcing their city of what was it called? City of Sanctuary, and they had two people presenting. One was a migrant and one was a refugee, and I can't tell the difference. So perhaps we need to be a bit clearer in our definition in that update as to what a migrant is and what a refugee is. So it's clear, because it's unclear at the moment. Going back to Andrew's point about, we need a status on each item. I think that's required. We need to have a status column, closed, open, in progress, whatever,
Sounds very good. Good idea.
Sorry, can I just
Alison.
some of the font is much paler than other bits in the progress column, and I didn't know if that was indicative.
I've got to give you the classic. For those of you in black and white, it's blue.
And that's got meaning, has it? Well, there wasn't a key indicating what that meant.
I think that's Neil actually.
Sorry, it's in Neil's email. You read Neil's email, which it's attached to. Isn't it? Okay. Okay, so do we have to agree?
I will seek clarification on the points raised and come back to you all with a proposal on how we do that thing about if a person wants to know what's happening or he's not happy, what they do about it. Yeah.
Okay, is that everyone happy? Yeah, good. Right, okay.
And I just sort of, I'm happy with it. And again, I think the recommendations about how we make it even better are very good. But it has highlighted, I think, one of the problems that we all have as members, that if you do want to find out stuff about the business of the council, there is an assumption that you'll know which council meeting, which executive meeting you have to go to. And if you want, for example, there is no schedule anywhere of all the items of business that have ever been considered by council. The motions are numbered, and I really think there should be some sort of place you can go to, and you can scroll back through the last 10 years and just see the business, so that you can actually build up a picture of what's going on if you need to look at an issue. And the classic one is grass cuttings. If you search grass things on the Working Borough website, unless you know what meetings it was discussed, that you haven't got a chance in hell. I mean, all you want is like the title and then the date. You don't even know the type of meeting it is. That'd be helpful. But it's impossible to find out anything unless you know the date of the meeting.
Okay, is this something for the IT website development?
I suspect it's for Neil.
Well, I mean,
he needs another assistant.
I've actually had that conversation with Sally. And one of the problems at the moment is the system that's got the minutes and the agendas on it is not searchable from the website. It's a different system, and they're trying to fix that. I'm not saying that will fix it, but at the moment it definitely doesn't work.
So that might be something then to come back when we know either way if it's fixable, because at the moment it's terrible. It's a nightmare.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a website thing, isn't it? So yeah.
So perhaps then the recommendation could be that Neil, again, sorry, communicates with Sally, did you say, about when there is an end point for this either way, because if they can't make it work electronically, we're going to need a different method.
Somewhere in my notes I've got a date, but even then, it still depends on how good your search is. So I earlier on today looked for recycling bins because I wanted to buy a Borough Council recycling bin. And if you look for a recycling bin on the Borough Council website, there is no way you'll ever find a link to buy a Borough Council recycling bin. The search is still not working.
Okay, and Adrian.
One very small point. I work for a very large company which produces huge amounts of documents, but what it does is it publishes them to Google, and everybody uses Google to search. So rather than creating new technologies in our back-end systems and incurring lots of IT costs, just publish them to Google, and then we use Google to search them.
Okay.
So obviously confidential stuff is
Okay, anyway, I think that's all for another day, isn't it? So should we move on to quickly to...
Sorry, Alistair. So just following up from Adrian. So again, I'm not fussed how it's made searchable, as long as it's made searchable.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, should we move on to agenda item 53, the executive forward programme on page 77. So has anyone got any comments on page 77, 78, 79 or 80? No, okay. Then the individual member forward plan on pages 83 and 84. Okay, good. So moving on to agenda item 54, the draft work programmes. So starting with us on page 88. It's the meeting in January. Looks quite busy. Any comments on that?
Yeah,
Alan?
I noticed when we were looking at the motions, Gary's motion about reviewing the constitution said that, you know, the drastically improved and revised constitution would be put through full council before the elections. Now that indicates it's going to have to go to council in March, doesn't it?
No, it's that I don't believe that to be right. I'm on that working group.
Okay, well, I was simply going to say, I think we should. Do we need to have, you know, this come for scrutiny, this new constitution, before it goes to full council in March? But if you're suggesting, Andy, it's no way going to be ready by then.
I'm trying to remember. I think I can't remember who the officer is because it's all blurring into one mass of meetings. But I don't think it's going to be finished before May. I think it's going to be afterwards. Just there's too much.
Well, approval before the May 24 elections indicates the March.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is I don't think that's correct. I think that was the original intention, but I think what's coming out of the working group is not correct. So it might be done for Neil to check that bit. Me, Keith, who else? Prue, Imogen. Oh, every day, 6 to 7.
Okay, so
So can I just ask you, the principle of the new constitution coming here before it goes for final approval, you want that to go in the work programme?
What we're asking you is this suggestion that it will go to full council for approval before the May elections, which means the March council meeting. Is it on track to do that?
I defer to Andy, who's on the working group, so it would have, I will check after this meeting.
I don't think that it will be completed. There'll be bits of it which are completed, but I don't think it will be completed before May. That's my recollection. So, but I guess the general principle is once it's finished, does it need to come to scrutiny? That's probably the more important question.
Andrew?
Yeah, I think that's the key question. And on this occasion, because of the nature of the item, the Constitution, which will have been given a very, very thorough, I'm sure, consideration, you know, by the working group. It's a working group, task and finish group. Yeah. On this occasion, okay, I would defer to Andy as one of the members of that committee, you know, as to whether or not it should come to an overview and scrutiny committee. I'd probably actually say I would defer to the views of the committee, you know, that committee. Okay, I wouldn't feel comfortable just leaving this to Andy.
Okay, great.
I'm just reading from the last meeting. I'm trying to find the right bit, and the feedback we had from the LGA was that our timetable was very ambitious, and that further options would potentially need to be considered.
Okay, Chris.
Yeah, I think just to add to Alison's and to close it off, that we request that the working group give us an update to go on to that document. I think that's the thing we need to do. We can't turn around and say, please bring it in because it's too early. Can we have an update at the timescales of the progress?
Okay, I've just found that okay, so at the moment we're at the final phase 1 constitution being approved by full council on 22nd of February. Phase 2 elements will then be picked up in July 2024 with a view to autumn 2024. So they've split it in half, so it's not the full part. I am trying to.
So if you want to listen to the B side here.
Forward to this
Phase one is the council and subcommittees, structure and decision making, councillors, officers, public participation and rights. Oh, and it says not for publication. Oops.
So thanks a lot for the update.
Public meeting, so being live streamed. So right. So everything else. They'll just have to get in the queue. Everything else will be done after the election. So I was half right, which is not bad for me. Okay.
Just to say it's almost 10:30, so does somebody want to move that we carry on for half an hour, or do you want to just pack it in now?
Okay,
Second. We don't need to vote on whether or not to continue for another.
Okay, who's proposing that we continue on for an extra 10 period?
I'll propose it.
I'll second it. Let's carry on.
I think there was only 2 in favour, 3 in favour.
All those in favour? All against?
Okay, we will quickly carry on. So so is there any other comments on Overland Scrutiny management work programme? Up to page 90.
Sorry to be a pain. So did we agree that we would now bring the part 1 to scrutiny of the Constitution?
Okay, so Norman.
Can I just say we've got quite a lot on the agenda for those meetings, and it's shown us tonight, I think, that we need to have a bit of rigour as far as timescales on each of the items is concerned, to make sure that we get through, and that we're not basing at 10:30 every meeting.
Okay. Right, noted, and I must do better, sorry. So children's services, anyone you can say about that? No. Page 93, climate emergency forward programme. No, up to page 95. Community Corporate Overland Scrutiny Committee, page 96. Chris.
Observation on activity that we had in the last one. We are bringing one of the items back on the 28th, so we're adding St Crispin's again on the 28th of November.
Okay, St Crispin's is back on the 28th.
Did we also not say that we'd be looking at the waste collection future contract? So there's the 2026. There's a new contract, and then there is the rollout of the new system, and they're 2 separate things. So I think the new procurement bit should be a new item separate from the current project, which is on corporate community at some point.
And Andrew.
Yeah. Yes, I think and Andy, I think that was what we discussed. But I think that in this instance, we need first to seek the advice of officers as to when the best timing for that would be. Okay. Because it will depend on certain things having happened you know. So I
I'm
think we come back, let them come back to
I'm
us.
not saying when,
Yeah.
I'm saying that we put it on some,
should
so
be
that
a-
it sits there
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
a reminder.
Yeah, I think it should be put on as an item somewhere,
Can we ask
but
for-
not a test,
Okay.
a date. Okay, so, moving on to, no more, okay, moving on to health, over scrutiny. Or program. No comments. Good. So moving on to agenda item 55, the action tracker. Oh, the action tracker. Have we got any comments on the action tracker on page 103, 104, 105? No. Yes, Chris.
Well, it's just a question. At what stage do completed items get taken out?
I'll have to ask Neil.
So at the moment, we're keeping items on for the municipal year. So then we'll have a call when we get to the next municipal year.
Okay, thanks. Neil.
Can I just add that I sent round an email today. We've had an invite from Thames Water for a site visit on the, looks like the 30th of November to the Wargrave sewage treatment works. It's like,
So that's in the pipe.
like a breath of fresh air apparently. So if anyone's interested, I've had some replies already.
We ended the broadcast.
Right, so I think that's the end of the meeting. So turning off the live